No, this is the first time we've ever had this. Oh, she's the Ellie Morris.
Hey, everybody. We're going to start. Please rise and salute the flag.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Master Plan Advisory Board. For the benefit of those that haven't attended one of these meetings in the past, I'll give my brief introduction, as I do before every meeting, as to the format and the purpose of this meeting. The Master Plan Advisory Board was put together about a year ago to do what's called a re-examination report of the township's master plan. Because of the large undertaking that such a re-examination report is, several subcommittees were then formed from the overall advisory board. The people that you see up here, which I'm going to ask to introduce themselves in a moment, are the people of the advisory board. So this is not a meeting of any particular subcommittee. The subcommittees have met, some of them several times over the past year. And so who you see now, some of the members of the advisory board are members of subcommittees, and but what you see here is the Master Plan Advisory Board. This meeting is a little bit different than the typical public meeting that we go to of the Township Committee or Planning Board or Zoning Board, in that it's really meant to be a little more informal, and a lot of the formalities that you follow with those other meetings don't really apply to this meeting. We don't really follow those formalities, except where we need to take some sort of formal action on reports or decisions. So the format of tonight's meeting is that we're going to review 4 of the subcommittee reports which have been finalized on those particular subcommittees. Those 4 reports that we're going to review tonight are the Parks and Open Space Report, the Transportation Report, the Downtown Report, and the Senior Community Needs Report. There's still the report of the Housing Density Subcommittee, which has not been finalized. The Housing Density Subcommittee did meet, I think, twice over the last year. And that subcommittee has asked for at least one more meeting, if not 2 meetings, to further review findings and to discuss different ideas, and then to put together a final report, which that final report will be heard at a public subcommittee meeting, just like this meeting, just like all the other subcommittee meetings have been, and then finally discussed at an overall advisory board meeting like this, once it's been finalized by that subcommittee. So issues such as housing density and things like that are not really going to be reviewed during tonight's advisory board meeting. And like I was saying, there's no report that's been issued yet for that subcommittee, so that's not really something that's on the agenda. But of course, there's going to be a public portion, and if there's anybody from the public that wants to comment on those types of issues, you're certainly welcome to do so. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask the advisory board members, starting on my left, just to announce their names, so at least you know who's talking and who you're talking to. Starting with Ms. Allie Morris.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Allie Morris, Remington Burnick Engineers. I'm also the Planning Board Administrator. My office is upstairs right outside the elevator.
Good evening, my name is Mike McNeil.
Can't hear. These mics are bad.
Well, there's one thing that I want to announce also to the committee members and also to the public. The mics actually work. The mics are not bad, but everybody needs to talk into the mic clearly, and then also members of the public, when you get up to the podium, the mics work if you talk into them. So please, everybody talk into the mics.
Is this better?
Yeah.
My name is Mike McNeil.
My name is Justin Flanstein.
I'm Bill Hobday.
Mike McLaughlin.
Motion Lieberman.
Steve Run. And there are still some other members of the advisory board that have not arrived yet, but because there's so many people here, I really just didn't want to keep everybody waiting until everybody arrives. So you called me in for 6 o'clock, and I like to start meetings on time. We have 4 reports, like I was saying, to review. What I'm going to ask is, before we get into each individual report, I'm going to ask the chairman of that particular subcommittee who comprised that report, and by the way, the chairman of, all the chair people of the subcommittees are members of the overall advisory board. There are certain people that I see in the crowd that are members of subcommittees, but they're not members of the overall advisory board, but the chair people are all members of the advisory board. So before we discuss the individual reports, which have been finalized, which were posted on the township's website several days ago, I'm going to ask each chairperson just to give a brief overview of the report, any highlights that they want to point out to the public. I'm going to ask members of the advisory board first if they have any comments on reports, any suggested revisions, suggestions to be incorporated into the report. We have our professionals here, who I forgot to introduce. If you want to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, Stan Slahetka from T&M Associates with the planning consultant for the township.
My name is Martin Truscott. Martin Truscott with T&M Associates also.
Our professionals were forwarded each of the reports, and they're here firstly to answer anybody's technical questions that they might have, but also to note comments either from the advisory board or from members of the public regarding the individual reports, so they can make any suggestions that we decide should be incorporated into those final versions. So that's the full. So we'll go over the 4 reports. We also have a piece of correspondence from the Lakewood Industrial Commission regarding zoning, a proposed zoning ordinance for school development in the Lakewood Industrial Park. So we have that correspondence to review, again, between the members of the advisory board, and then I'll ask members of the public if they want to comment on that at all. And then we have, we'll do a general comment session from the board members, comments from the public, and then adjourn. So that's the format. We have a lot of people here. Just I just ask if we can give the full our full attention to the subcommittee chairman and to the advisory board. The subcommittees spend a lot of time on their individual reports. Many hours were spent. Many hours were spent by the chair people of the subcommittees, and I want to thank them for all their hard work. And I think that they really did a good job, and hopefully we'll get through this sooner than later. So without further ado, the first report that I would like to review is the Parks and Open Space report. The chairman of that subcommittee was Bill Hyde. Is that correct, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. So Bill, so like I was saying before, I'll ask for highlights from that chairman of that subcommittee, and then what we'll do is after we're done discussing it with various board members, if any members of the public want to comment on that individual report, please feel free to do so, and then we'll hopefully formally adopt each report one at a time by the advisory board.
Thanks, Justin. The group, there was the subcommittee for this Parks and Open Space subcommittee, consisting of myself as chairman, Ali Morris, vice chairman, Nagama Morgan, and Yissi Levy. The 4 of us put together a document based on prior documents and our judgment as to how well they were taken care of, what needs to be done, what worked, what didn't work. And we started with the 206-207 master plan reexamination and the 2008 addendum to the reexamination report. 2009 smart growth plan was not adopted but continued to be revised, yielding the smart growth plan, which was adopted in 2013. In 2014, amendments to the reexamination report and the master plan addendum. In 2016, Lakewood, the recommendation report draft. So now we're into the planning, the new master plan report. And for some background, Lakewood Department of Public Works is in charge of an area of Lakewood, 26 square miles, has 217 miles of township streets. Public Works Department is responsible for the maintenance and repair of the township roads and sewers, township parks and open space, which drew our attention, and snow plowing of township streets, leaf and brush collection, garbage and recycling collection, and tire, refrigeration, and appliances that contain refrigerants collection. And the director of that department is Patrick Donnelly. He's the director. We looked at all of the existing parks in Lakewood. And we have nice pictures and they depict what they are, what they do, what amenities are offered there. And we discovered there are 11 of them. The community center on 4th Street, Jasso Park on Locust Street, Frank Bartlett Sports Complex on Brook Road, Head Start, East 8th Street, Hearthstone Park and Hearthstone Drive, North Beach Park on North Lake Drive, Oak Street School, said Oak Street School, the playground there, Reverend Clayton Park, John Street, South Beach, South Lake Drive, Spruce Street School, that's Spruce Street School, the playground, Sunset Park on Sunset Boulevard. Now, before sitting on this committee, I was unaware that we had this many parks in Lakewood. But I was pleased to see that there are. The recreational program, throughout the year, Lakewood offers a full slate of recreational programs, special activities geared to children, adults, and families. So we go through all of the parks individually, did an assessment, talked to an awful lot of people about how well things were being done, how well the parks were being managed and maintained. And sometimes we found wonderful results, and sometimes we found not so good results. So we wanted to highlight that and say about the parks, only 3 of the parks can accommodate team sports such as football, soccer, baseball, etc. Right now, and that's Pine Park, Bartlett, Brook Park, and Vine Park. Now, John J. Patrick Park, which appears to be underutilized because you have to apply for your team to use that facility. And it's a recommended meeting of the teams to work out a schedule to include additional team sport activities. For example, one gentleman came to us that he has a team that was denied access to the park because they hadn't registered for it. Well, you know, we believe that the park, first of all, is underutilized. So let's utilize it. Let's come up with a system to have the teams all get together and talk about this, work out a schedule and forward that schedule so everybody gets their turn at the plate. So we're making a strong recommendation to fully utilize the existing parks that we have. That's number 1. Use what you have and use it to the maximum. Maintenance and upkeep is required. We've seen parks where the basketball hoop remains, but the net is gone. Well, you know, if we're going to have a basketball court, let's make sure that there's a net on the basketball hoop and some kind of striping so that the youth that or people that use the basketball courts at least has the appearance of being a basketball court. Funding for existing parks. The budget for maintenance needs to be examined for adequacy. You see, when a department in government, such as Public Works, does all those things that I mentioned and are constrained by a budget, it's easy to say, if I need to add another garbage truck or another snowplow, I'm going to do that, and possibly at the expense of a recreation or a park or a recreation area. Because people are going to complain very quickly if their snowplow didn't arrive, but they're not as willing to come in and complain about a missing basketball net. What we're suggesting is each park needs a budget line item for maintenance, repair, and replacement. If you're going to have a park, make that park a good park, accessible to the neighbors that can use it and want to use it because it's a nice place to go. You don't want to go to some ragtime place that is not being managed or maintained. Do it right. If you're going to do it at all, do it right. So routine monitoring is needed. And here again, by whom? everything we say here is an expense that taxpayers don't like to share. However, if we are going to make room for recreation, if we are going to make room for these kinds of things, it doesn't come without cost. It does have a cost. If we're going to have the parks, we have to maintain it. Funding for new parks and possible supplemental funding for existing parks. Possible recreation trust fund. I don't believe the general fund is, or the budget of the Public Works Department is the proper place to have that budget. A recreation fee for each new building permit received, and we receive about 1,000 permits a year. If we put a $25 fee on that, we would draw $25,000. Just to be used specifically earmarked for maintenance, replacement of things that wear out, and things like that to keep that park clean and usable. We want upcoming development areas within anticipated parks needs. Prospect Cross Street Triangle. T&M is to identify the township-owned properties in this area that could be used. There are many, many lots and/or properties in there that are owned by Lakewood Township. This is a good area. Let's identify those and determine if that can be used for recreational purposes. Drake, White Street, and Cross Street. T&M to check on the fringes of the park to determine the properties that could be used. Maybe there's some properties along there. We have a whole line of yeshivas in that area. James Street area. Again, let's look. Oak Street, Carter. Pocket linear parks already are proposed, but some right-of-way need to be vacated to accomplish this. In other words, the parks weren't really spoken for in the beginning. There are some areas that, yes, we're looking at putting aside for park and recreational space. Kennedy Boulevard right-of-way. This is a right-of-way from Kennedy Boulevard to the Bricktown border, where there was a 120-foot wide right-of-way that they were going to build as an alternate path to County Line Road. Lakewood, at the time it was proposed by the county, decided not to. So the county backed out and deeded that property to Lakewood. Now, it can't be used for many things, but it could be used for a bike path, approximately a railroad to Brook Road Park, consisting of an asphalt path and basic lighting. It wouldn't cost an awful lot. We own the property. Recommended utilizing the entire right-of-way in all abutting township properties to be dedicated to newly designed park. Now, this would not be the park as you might envision it. This is 120 feet wide, and it runs from Kennedy Boulevard all the way up to the brick border, behind the houses that face County Line Road. That would be a perfect kind of a park for basketball, for bike riding, for skateboarding, for anything that the mind can imagine. Recommendation utilizing the entire right-of-way, would it would dedicate it to new design park. We would have to do some asphalt paving, benches at intervals, basketball poles, extensions, hoops and nets, bicycle lanes, skateboard areas, shelter areas at different intervals along the way. And if we did that, it would be a very minimal expense to creating a new park that would serve all of that community that resides in that area. I think so. It would be a wonderful thing to do. So in summation, Lakewood needs to better maintain the recreational facilities that are present. Cost analysis and priority are important parameters. Number two, Lakewood needs to better fund the recreational facilities, possibly dedicate additional costs for each permit To add recreational budget, this is $25 per permit, that yields about $25,000. Number 3, ensure that all existing recreational facilities are adequately served the needs of the residents in the area. Don't have a park in the area that you have neglected and expect those children or young adults to use it. Number 4, consider establishing a recreational commission to help oversee parks and open spaces. We have none. We should have one. Number 5, post the condition of parks on the township website, out of order, under repair, good, better, and best. Let people know from the website how well the park that they are closest to is managed. Number 6, encourage and establish a recreational suggestion box on the township website. Maybe you have a suggestion to improve a park, or to redevelop a park, or a suggestion for a new park, or to close down one that isn't utilized. Number 7, post booked recreational activities schedule on the township website. If you want to book something at one of the parks, you should be able to sign up on the township website. Number 8, encourage and adopt a park program for groups and sponsors. Sometimes, if the municipality doesn't always have the funds necessary to do these kinds of maintenance, upkeep, repair, replacement, sometimes you can get neighbors to adopt a park, to care for it, do the cleaning, making sure it's okay, and alert the township of problems there. Sponsors, merchants could kick in and help with this. It would be a wonderful thing for them to do. And number 9, preserve and closely examine adding the right-of-way to Kennedy Boulevard East from Squonkam Road in the west to the municipal boundary of Brick Township in the east, because it would cost us minimal amounts of money, and it would add a tremendous program for youth and young adults. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. That was pretty good, I gotta say. You know, Bill and Allie and everybody else on that subject, we spent a lot of time. As you can see, and even though my skateboarding days are over, I pretty much fully concur with everything that Bill said. Thank you very much. Are there any? We do have two members of the advisory board that walked in a little bit late. If you just want to introduce yourself, Shaul, just say your name.
Shaul Langman.
Ben Heineman.
So are there any members of the advisory board? I'm assuming everybody's reviewed the report. Even if you didn't, Bill just gave a very, very good summary of the report. Are there any members of the advisory board that have any questions for Bill, or any suggestions, or anything that they would like to say?
I have one. Bill and the committee, when we talk about a rec commission, are we talking about paid positions? Are we talking about creating a parks department?
We're not talking about paid positions. The purpose of, and I'm sorry, when Bill talks about recommendation, we're not talking about paid positions. These would be volunteer positions, and a recreation committee, a commission is something that would be looked at by the town, obviously. But the purpose, as Bill stated, is to give more attention to a lot of the parks, to the parks in town, because some of them are somewhat neglected, and it's unfortunate. So that would be the purpose of the commission. I'm sorry, Bill, if you want to add anything.
Well, Lakewood is a town where we often volunteer. And that's why we have so many advisory committees. In other words, these are the committees. See, from my look, in my research, when everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. You have to have a committee, an ad hoc committee, call it what you want, to look at parks, open space, and recreation. How well are we doing? What ones are being managed well, which ones aren't? And to make that recommendation to the township committee that can then go right back to Public Works and say, you know, what happened here? What happened there? Or, in my ultimate thing would be to have this advisory committee report to the township, who would then talk to the powers that be that Department of Public Works, but I really would like to move it out there and make it independent, to give work orders to Public Works to go fix that.
Just one more question. Did we think about some of the reasons maybe these parks aren't being utilized, or another aspect that may have to be added is security? Who patrols these parks? Is that something that we get the help from the county on? Are we responsible? Does our police department do it?
Our Lakewood PD does drive-bys on these. They know the parks and they know the areas. The only thing what I didn't mention in here, I mentioned all the Lakewood parks, but of course Ocean County Park is over here. And that is, I believe the sheriff controls that. So, you know, we're kind of out of that. It's within the boundaries of Lakewood, but that's another really jurisdiction as far as security and law enforcement.
Jay? Yeah.
I think there's a typo on page 9, in 3, funding for new parks, 1,000 permits per year, $25 a piece. I think it's $25,000, not $250,000.
That was a late catch. I caught it, and I did say 25,000.
You did.
Only us folks have this report, so before anybody else sees it, it will be changed.
Thank you.
Of course, we could move the fee up from 25 to 2,500.
That sounds good, Bill.
You just lost all your votes to me on recreation. Okay, any other advisory board members want to comment on Bill's report? Are there any members of the public who have any questions about the Parks and Open Space Recreation? Please come up to the mic.
Good evening. My name is John McCrossan from Lakewood. My questions are for Bill, but before I ask the question, I just want to give you a little bit of my concern for recreation and the land that's put aside for recreation. I grew up in New York City, was very involved in sports and athletics when I was young growing up. Grew up in a very rough area in New York City. I probably wouldn't be here today if it weren't for sports. So with that, I'd like to ask Bill a few questions. Bill, first of all, I'm impressed with the detail of your report. However, I have a few other questions that I think are very significantly important to the planning of Lakewood. And that is, in the last 15 years, could you convey to the public and to myself what has happened to the allotment of recreational space here in the town as it relates to the 26 miles or so? Has it decreased or increased, and has density had an effect on the amount of land that is allotted for sports and recreation?
We have not increased recreation areas, and I think it was on the back burner for an awful long time. It was on the back burner because Lakewood Township was more interested in homes, schools, bringing people here to Lakewood to live. What does that mean? Now we have a very high density of residents here, and yes, the parks and recreation areas that we do have are fine, but they've been here for a long time. That's why we're advocating an additional park that would be a wonderful thing to do. But anytime you talk about an additional expense, you better justify it 3 times from maybe. In my estimation, as chairman of this committee, we had better do it because we need to provide that space for children, young adults, and people that would just like to exercise, walk their dog, ride their bike. We see Justin on his skateboard, things like that. This is absolutely necessary because you dare not ride on a county road, that's for sure. Or you won't have a next day to your life.
Bill, that's not answering the question I'm asking. What I'm trying to get at is, what effect has density had on the shrinkage or the increase in the allocation of acreage for sports and recreation here in Lakewood? Has it shrunk or has it increased in the last 10, 15 years? Go back to the last plan, 2003, whenever it was that you did it. Did you compare where we are today with where we were then and where we're going as it relates to further density of Lakewood?
Yes. What we basically did was look at the report from 2006, Master Plan Committee report from 2006. We looked at that in comparison with today's website. Hasn't changed much. That tells me, well, not only hasn't it changed much, but an awful lot of these parks are not being well maintained. And that's because what I've said previously is because it's a budget item. If I'm the Director of Public Works and I have to have consideration whether I need a new garbage truck or to put restripe and redo or put new macadam on a park, I think I'm going to choose that garbage can. That's why I'm saying I think that there has to be an advisory committee to take this out of their hands, to make direct recommendations to the township committee that can decide how that's going to be funded, and that's why you need this additional funding source, and it should come from permits. And to specifically get into, and I know you're nailing me on what has improved, and the answer is nothing. But we're making a recommendation for a whole new park. We're making a recommendation that we utilize the parks that we have better, and we're recommending that if we have a park, it must be maintained.
Okay, I appreciate that. My last question is this, Bill. Have you or the town, the subcommittee here, done a benchmark to other towns within Ocean County with respect to the amount of square miles that you manage here in Lakewood and how it compares from a Parks and Recreation allocation of that 26 miles or thereabouts in other towns throughout the county?
No, and we haven't done it because Lakewood is unique and is not like any other surrounding town.
Why? We have children. We have children, just like any other town.
We are uniquely gifted to have Lake Carasaljo, all of the other lakes here in Lakewood that are natural. We have Ocean County Park that I neglected only because it's not a Lakewood Park, it's a county park. We have Lake Shenandoah County Park. We have Pine Park. We have John F. Patrick Sports Complex. By the way, that's new. That's about 5 years old. We have smaller municipal parks and playgrounds at Canterbury Park. Clifton Avenue School has a wonderful playground area that's open to the public. The community center down on 4th Street. Diazzo Park. Frank Bartlett Sports Complex. Head Start. Hearthstone Park. And by the way, talking about Hearthstone Park, a woman from that community called to say that the park over there was in complete disrepair. The swings didn't work, they were hanging. I called the Department of Public Works. They dispatched a worker within 2 days, closed the park for 2 days, fixed it, and I got a call a week later from the woman that called me. She said, "Thank you very much." They came and repaired it. So it's not that they're unable or unwilling to do it, it's that people don't know how to report problems or where to report problems. All of you, as residents of Lakewood, have an obligation to report problems. If it's there, it's got to be in good repair. We're not going to trust a swing that might break when our children are on it. Let's get this done. Let's make sure that it's all reported. Let's make sure it's held in high regard, and those residents are ready, willing, and able to use those parks.
And that's only going to happen if you prioritize and put some money in the budget to maintain your parks and the recreation facilities,
And
which you don't do today.
There is a budget for it, but it's not an earmarked budget. It's not one that says, this is specifically for parks and recreation. What I want to do is earmark that stuff and add to the budget this $25,000 that might be used to help out in that maintenance facility.
And I know where there's another $500,000, and that is if the township started charging for garbage collection for the private schools, you'd have another $500,000 if the parks and
I think in addition to the John J. Patrick Park, which is new, I think Sunset Park was redone probably 5 or 10 years ago as well. It's a beautiful park with a baseball field and new playground equipment and basketball court. So that's another new park that went in the last 10 years or so.
Wonderful, thanks.
Yeah, Moshe Zainis, someone to Elmhurst Boulevard, Lakewood. First of all, it's so nice to see such a great crowd up here at the bench. First of all, I just want to comment regarding we say the allocation of funds. I think that if all that you do is have these volunteer commissioners, Parks Commission, volunteer their time and basically ask nudge the township committee to say we need money for this, we need money for that, then basically you're also going to be asking them to take out of the big pie funds. What I would suggest, and I did suggest this once to the township committee, so when you make the Parks and Open Space Commission, you make it the way that LIC is set up. Just like the LIC does a great job, and what they do with their funds for the industrial park, the Parks Commission could have their own budget, their own funds, and then they're appropriating those funds for their parks. Right now we have the Department of Public Works with a lot of money and a lot of jobs, and like you said, Bill, they can't do it all because the funds are being thrown around. If all the parks guys do is go into the township committee and say we need money from your big pie, they're going to say, well, we have a lot of things that need money from the pie. So I just sort of add on to what you're saying, that it's not just a Parks Commission just to ask for the funds, but that they should get the funds, I guess, in the beginning of the year or whatever it is, and then use that. Okay, that's my comment on that. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, for the whole Parks and Subcommittee, I'm hearing now a report about what you would like the township to do to fix the current parks, and you'd like TNM to look at more space for parks. So first of all, if TNM does find more space, again, if you have a Parks Commission that has their own funds, they could really get that ball rolling. But what I didn't hear anything about is, would you recommend, I think it was discussed at some of the subcommittees, that's why I'm asking, I'm not hearing it now, about recommending that, let's say right now when a developer develops, I think this 25 lots, he has to put in swings and things. Would you recommend to the township committee that number be changed? If the guy makes 8 single-family houses out in the middle of nowhere's land, and there's no park over there, would somehow the number from 25 go down? Or if there's less than 25, would they be required to put in something? It doesn't have to be swings, it could be a different thing. If it's more than 25 homes, could there be more than just 2 swings? It could be 4 swings, like some kind of number, because I used to live near Whispering Pines. Shabbos afternoon, you have 200 kids for 8 swings, like something that didn't work out there. 4 park benches, all the expectant mothers had to take turns on them. This is some kind of new idea, new ordinance, and not just what you're talking about the township to do their part, but for the developers to chip in. Is that also on that? That's my question.
Now, first of all, I totally agree that budget be moved. I totally agree that there's not enough attention given to this today. But remedial action for that is an awful lot of times slow in coming. Township governments, and I don't care whether it's Lakewood, Toms River, how, it doesn't matter. You know who makes a difference to them? you do. If you demand better recreation areas, the recreation areas that are there are used to fullest possible extent, and that they're good and clean and maintained, they will listen to you. Now, because this is an advisory committee, we can recommend these kinds of things. There's no way we can make them do it. It is up to them to listen to you to say, this is our town. We want to protect these children and young people that go to these parks, and we want them to have a very satisfying recreation area. Now, the mechanism by which that happens, the funding, who holds the funds, who does the orders, that's up to the township committee.
Yeah, but they need your advice on how to make it happen. There's a lot of stuff going on in this town. I just drove today, the whole day through town. There's a lot of stuff happening in town. Everyone needs money. Everyone needs fixing. Every park needs fixing. I spent the whole day at the zoning office, and needs a lot of fixing. Call this one, call that one. He comes at 2, he comes at 3, come back at 4, come next week. A lot of stuff in this town needs to be fixed up. The only way each park can be fixed up is if there's its own crew with its own money. You know what I mean?
But where's that money going to come from? And that's the bottom
There
line.
is the large pie. I understand. Take that pie and slice it and sell it into 6, into 8.
And that's what Bill's talking about in the report. He's talking about a fee to utilize the parks, which is going to be dedicated towards maintenance and upgrades and keeping the parks nice.
And
that's where the money's going to come
that
from.
money that would go for a permit could go straight to this separate bank
I agree
account.
with that. I agree
You
with
know what I'm
that.
saying? The same way that LIC gets its funds, and then they reuse those funds for its things.
Yeah, that's very
I just wanted to
You're right.
clarify.
Money collected for parks should stay for the parks. I agree.
Thank you.
Noreen Gill, 192 Coventry Drive, resident of Lakewood for 45 years.
I'm sorry.
On March 31st, 1976, this township embarked on building a community center. 41 years later, come April 1st, the township committee announces that the community center is in disrepair. Now, we went through the Little League being moved, John Patrick Field, great. They're taking the community center, which was the heartbeat of Lakewood. Mookie Wilson, you have no idea, many of you sitting up here, you didn't live here, okay? At that time, maybe some Justin did, Mr. Hyman did, and Mike McNeil did, maybe you did. However, we've had a lot of baseball players, basketball players come out of Lakewood and go with the basketball teams, okay? The community center was a central point for those who could not travel. At the township meeting, I sat there, and when I heard that, I said, great, we got rid of the Little League field, which was a historic site because we won the championship, and now that's a parking lot. Okay, now, why are we getting rid of the community center? We're getting rid of it because there's a new shopping center and a developer there, and the people that just moved into those homes across the street from the community center can't take the noise. I have news for you. That community center was there before the people. I was told publicly by Mr. D'Elia that the kids get to John Patrick Field now, and they'll get there. Well, I have news for you. There's a lot of children in this town that will not be able to get there. And the township never kept the community center up. However, a developer said, and this is what I was told by the township committee, oh, he's gonna build a nice community center out there by the Oak Street development. I said, is it for the entire community? To me, me, a community center is not John Patrick Field. A community center is something in the center that everyone can either get to and be able to play in. A child, yes, you have parks. I went to Sunset Park 2 weeks ago with my grandchildren because I couldn't get on anything in Pine Park. I go to Sunset Park. Their grandmother lives over there, their other grandmother. I couldn't even get them to sit on a bench to have a drink of water. The parks are overcrowded, okay? Here's you're talking about cut the pie. Here's my take on the pie being cut. We have 26 square miles, right? A couple of years ago, we had 3,000 people per square mile. Do you know now we have 5,000 square people per mile? And in 2030, in 13 years, that pie will have grown because we're expecting over 200,000 people to live in Lakewood. Now, how can we go from year to year and cut this pie? How are we going to do it when we keep adding on to the density in this town? Okay? I'm all for parks, I'm all for recreation. However, this pie is not going to look like this in 13 years. Okay? It's going to be more expensive. And I'm not against having recreation for our children in Lakewood at all. I'm just saying to you that density is the problem. No one here has a quality of life.
Mr. Gill, the community, this report was completed on January 15, 2017. And that was before we learned anything about the community center. I agree with you. It would be a tragedy to destroy that community center where it is and move it anywhere else.
Ariel Schulman, 59 Drake Road. I just wanted to make a statement about the parks and recreations and what you're trying to do. Our public tax dollar already pays for that. We have a superintendent at Public Works Department, supervisor of parks. We have these things. Let's make them manage and work. Let's make them work for their dollar. They make a lot of money. We have supervisors. We're top heavy over at Public Works right now. Let's get some people in doing the jobs. Years ago, it already pays for this. We never had any trouble managing Pine Park. Why is it open? Why is it not closed? We already have security that goes around and checks our parks. We pay for that. There's no reason to have a committee to oversight that. How about just letting Public Works work and do their job?
Let me answer that. The reason we advocate a committee is because the state of the parks right now, apparently, it is not being done.
It's mismanaged.
If they have to, this committee is going to have the authority to go to the township committee and say, you see that park? How did it get that way? It's your responsibility to manage and maintain it.
I
Why
can
aren't you
explain
doing
some
it?
of that. We have playground maintenance. There was a gentleman for many, many years who did our playground maintenance. He retired. Somebody was paid in our township to go to Rutgers to take that test. They took that test and then they went to another township on our tax dollar. This has been going over and over and over again. There's a lot of money that's been awarded to Public Works. It's been put on surveillance. For what? It's been put tracking in trucks. Why do we need, we're only 26 miles. You can hardly move in our town. Why do our trucks need to be tracked? Why? Why?
Well, I mean,
So there's a lot of mismanagement of money, and I think that you can find the money within the Parks Department to pay for the maintenance of the parks. How about closing them at night? Pine Park is a night, we have our museum there. Why is it open at night? What goes in the parks at night? Nothing good happens in the park at night. ATVs go in there, rip up our fields. Do you know how much it costs to re-level out a baseball field or a soccer field so nobody's foot or ankle gets broken? How about in the middle of the night, somebody comes in there and breaks their leg? That's another liability to the township.
I understand that, but we're trying to concentrate on parks and open space right now. And the idea is, we're not gonna be able to address all the issues in the township.
But
The
my point
township has to
is,
do that.
my point is, Mr. Hodges, the money is already there. That's the point. The money is already there. Thank you.
Denise Gregory, 1179A Argyle Circle. 20 years ago, I moved to a very high-density, or it wasn't high-density when I moved there, a very fast-growing area, and that was the Raleigh Research Triangle Park area, Duke, that whole area. One of the things that they did in their master planning, which was slightly mentioned by Mr. Zinas, every contractor who was going to build a development not only had to include a park, they needed to include a first aid station, they needed to include a fire station, they needed to make sure that these things were part of the infrastructure so that the burden did not get dumped on the taxpayers. If they were increasing density, they needed to add the infrastructure to go with it. It worked extremely well, and it is still that policy today. I would urge everybody on this advisory council to recommend that to the town council and make it a mandate. Thank you.
Jerry Baldwin's Governor's Road. In the previous master plan, there was a recommendation in order to pay for open space, that there was going to be the creation of a special ordinance called the Non-Contiguous Cluster Ordinance. And it was also supposed to be part of the plan endorsement that was approved with the State Department of Community Affairs in Trenton. I would like to know what is the status of the creation of that ordinance, which would be the avenue for creating and preserving open space. And I think that probably would be neat to be asked by or answered by the professionals from T&M as to what is the status of that non-contiguous cluster ordinance, which was in the last master plan.
And actually, that's still part of the master plan. As soon as the master plan is completed, the recommendations will include the recommendation to adopt the non-contiguous cluster ordinance. In fact, it's actually part of the township's agreement with the state for plan endorsement, the planning and implementation agreement. So yes, the township is going to be moving forward with the non-contiguous clustering ordinance.
My question is, with so many new developments going in and the land is being built, is this really not a viable way to do this, that it's really become a dead issue, and that to try to say that it's still alive is really not really a factor?
No, to the contrary, it actually continues to be a viable component of the open space preservation strategy within the township.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Good evening, Josh Milton, New Lines Engineering. I had one comment, Gustavo, that I believe you missed in the report, although I didn't have a chance to read the entire thing. I think over the last decade or two, the one who's built the most parks in this town were not the township committee, but rather developers. Not only the developers.
Can you speak into the mic,
I'm
please?
sorry. And not only, I'm just a little short, it's hard to leave point like that. And not only do developers build these parks, their homeowner associations maintain it, keep it clean. I don't want to discount the senior communities as well. They have beautiful open areas that are maintained. They pay a lot of money for their homeowner associations to maintain and keep their areas clear. I've been to probably all the senior communities in this township, and they're gorgeous. Most of them are really, really beautiful and kept up. So when you're making your count, these are lands, these are parks, these are open space that are available to people who live in these communities. And a lot of developers that I've done business with went above and beyond and spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on equipment, on play equipment, on the proper equipment, on safe equipment for kids to play. And I think it's just something to recognize.
See, there's two groups over here in this room. One are the seniors, and one of the groups in the back is mainly Orthodox Jews, but they're mostly developers.
We make money on the area and don't do anything for the people that live there.
So the question is, the first gentleman brought up a question, what Lakewood in the last 15, 20 years, if there was any parks dedicated to the public or finished to the public that the public should be able to enjoy. As the population grows, parks didn't increase. The answer to that is that every time there's this open space that township owns land, these developers in the back of the room, they're the ones that, like vultures, look at these properties. And they try to buy it, to get it from the township. Some of these properties are undersized lots, and they could do it through a private sale from the township. They get it for peanuts on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar, I'm sorry, for my English. And other ones is being sold as public sales. We could see that, like by Prospect Park, as they were developing that neighborhood, some area that the township owned was supposed to be dedicated to the public. A developer now went and bought that property on a public sale at the township, and he's building town duplexes over there. So, the same thing happened by Oak Street Corridor. Oak Street Corridor had some of the land was owned by the township. The best evidence on that is because the township is the one that applied the CAFR, as the CAFR permit was applied by the township of Lakewood because they claimed that they have some land over there that they could make the application. The township went and sold the land to developers. Now, this land over there, Oak Street Corridor, in the immediate section where they're building the houses, has no top lots, no open space, and the township gave the developers special treatment to circumvent that they shouldn't have to dedicate open space, that they should be able to come for administrative approval for not go to the planning board and get everything approved without them requiring to apply for open space. Yes, the township did it, but in the same token, the township didn't have to give away or sell these open space that they had, that they could have dedicated to the public that is going to live over there. So all I'm saying to this it's a subcommittee from the open space, all your good work that you're recommending open space, as the population grows, you didn't identify that any land that the township owns should not be dedicated for developers to come in and try to grab that for building more houses. So Bill, my question is to you. Why was this not addressed in in your report, as all these land that the township owns, that it should not be sold to developers, or first to look into if we could use that as open space or top lots or anything like that?
On 2 occasions in the report, we asked to look at all open lots in Lakewood Township, specifically in the Cross Street corridor and in other places, on what lots were owned by the township to determine if that could be converted to parks and open space. Mr. Trescott helped us immensely by pointing out that area between East Kennedy Boulevard and Brick County border. That was excellent. That is going to provide, if it is approved, recreation for thousands of children. That is, in my estimation, the best new improvement to Lakewood, to provide that additional space and to keep it away from the developers. Now, as for the other areas, we cannot stand in here and say, don't sell properties to developers. Can't do it. That's unjust, because if a township has a property to sell for money, they should be able to do that. But they should do it at the market price, not below market price, and not to specific people based on something prearranged information.
If you calculate, if the township goes and sells a lot for developers to build their houses on it, the statistic shows in Lakewood that every house that is built, Lakewood Township loses taxpayer money. Because of the special ed from Chai, I agree. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Mr. Fine, I think you're on the right track here, because you want to try to balance growth with recreation, open space. We have to,
Yeah, I understand. I'm just finishing up.
Okay.
So, if the township wouldn't have sold this land, made this one-time money, especially the undersized lots that they're selling it for very little, if the township would have used that for open space, all this accumulation of taxes, it's not the rateable that it's coming in like commercial property. Residential is costing the township money. In the long run, we all gain. First of all, is we don't have the expense of the high density that is causing on the property taxpayer from Lakewood. And the second thing is, we would have had the residents of Lakewood would have had this recreational space to enjoy, and not have it when it was owned by the township. And you claim that you're looking into that Oak Street corridor. The township did it already. But as we go on, the township is still continue doing that, and you don't address that in your report. The township has very limited land still left. Why is the township still in the business of selling land?
My name is Shmuel Rabinowitz. I live on 70 Drake Road, one of the last places in Lakewood that has 1 acre zoning. I want to remind the seniors, just if I may, you're also in a 1 acre zone, but many years ago you had a sweet deal that somebody cut, that he said, you know what, if you have more than 100 acres, you could put 6 per acre. It's not something that people who live in Drake Road appreciate, but we live with it. So before everybody gets too excited with themselves, you just remember, if you have a high density that was done, and it wasn't even, you had a little bit of a preferential treatment there. So let's not get too excited with ourselves, let's discuss the issues at hand with a little bit, more economic. I want to go back to what the previous speaker spoke about, and I'm a little bit confused about what he said. He recommended, and he said, had it been his choice, in the Oak Street corridor, he would have said the township should not have sold land. The township should have kept the land and given the developers free parks. I think that's what he said. If I'm not mistaken, he said, please, the worst thing they did was they sold, and I'm speaking on behalf of the people that own land there for many years. He said the township should not have been in the business of selling the land, the township should have given parks. I disagree. I think if the township owns land, the township should utilize it and bring in money to taxpayers. And here's where it gets a whole lot more confusing. Because the township professionals looked at the land, it's a beautiful grid, it has many more roads than you have in almost any other development. And the professionals said that there are some extra roads which should be dedicated to parks. And guess who fought that? Our proud First Amendment activist came and he stopped it. Because he said that will not happen on his watch. So my question to you, Mr. Huffman, okay? And I know that you're focused on the seniors, which is okay. It's your people. But what about the people living in Oxford Corridor? And you're in charge of parks. Why aren't you pushing the township to put parks in those streets? Where are the parks? Because you looked at it and you saw the empty streets, and there are no streets there. They're not in the CAFR application. And why aren't they dedicated as parks? I'm that close. I can move into your seniors. I pay taxes more than you. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a favor from everybody.
Stop with the anti-Semitism. Terrible.
I'm going to ask a favor of everybody.
My God.
Please, let's, from the speakers that are coming up to speak for the public and also from the members of the board.
Terrible.
This is a meeting of the Master Plan Advisory Board.
Oh.
You heard a report from Mr. Hobden, a draft report for Parks and Recreation moving forward for the township for the next 10 years. This is not a forum, and I'll just be honest with you, this is not a forum to talk about things that have happened in the past, and this advisory board is not the township committee or the planning board or the zoning board. And I'm going to ask everybody, please, let's stick to the topic. I don't want to put a 2 or 3 minute time frame on everybody that wants to talk. I want everybody to be able to talk, but we have to stick to the program. We do have an agenda, we have things to get through. So let's not make this a back and forth type of thing. And also, let's keep all clapping and cheering. Please just keep it to a minimum. You want to clap. I mean, let's keep this moving, okay?
All right. On a different tone, Mr. Hopdike, why didn't you include in your report a recommendation to make those streets into parks?
When we looked at the Oak Street corridor, we took the previous master plan committee, the 2013 smart growth plan, and looked at what they said. We were not altogether sure of what was happening with the CAFR report for the Oak Street corridor. Now, as both were developing at the same time, and we realized that Oak Street corridor wasn't going to have all of the things that one would have wished here, because it appears that there is no recreation there.
I just told you there is.
Well, and I'm telling you, it appears that. Now, the township was deficient in not doing that, not insisting that there be local parks.
But
wait a minute.
Are you not aware that there are parks there?
Let me answer your question.
You looked at the plan?
Let me answer your question. However, when I think of the developers that didn't take that into account,
They did.
they're equally responsible.
Thank you.
Why are you saying untruths?
Well, because nature says.
Mr. Hobday, I'm sorry, I'm just very familiar with the CAFR plan, and we did, in our report, we did acknowledge that there were pocket parks proposed without CAFR permit.
Yes, but what
So
happened?
why would you
But
not?
that
They're there.
the township committee has failed to vacate certain specific rights of way that were dedicated to be linear parks. So Mr. Rabinowitz is just asking that in our report that we encourage the committee to follow through on those vacations so that the developers can put in those parks as proposed.
So we're in a position now, the developers own most of this, and there are pocket areas that were designated to be pocket parks. The only thing that is missing is the township committee's follow through to make that happen.
So can you make the recommendation? That's all I'm asking for.
Okay, so, because we have advocated there be pocket parks, we're still hoping that happens.
Can you be more specific in your report? For these pocket parks?
Well, there were designated areas that were supposed to be set aside.
So can you be, is it in your report?
Yes.
Oak Street? Are those pocket parks?
Our report says pocket/linear parks already proposed, but some rights of way need to be vacated to accomplish this. I think we could add a simple line, if at the discretion of the subcommittee, that says that the subcommittee is in support of those pocket parks and would encourage the committee to follow through on those statements.
Would that be okay?
You know, but we acknowledged what the plan was.
All right.
We do not get into who's gonna follow through, why are they gonna follow through, when are they gonna follow through, if they even are gonna follow through.
I hope you meant yes. I didn't understand what you said, but I hope you meant yes. Thank you.
We put the information
Brian Flannery, Mr. Hoppe, I think you did a good job on the report. I have no questions. I would have told you next time I saw you, good job on the report. But when Mr. Klein got up here and became divisive and giving misinformation, I had to stand up to say he's wrong. First of all, he said there's two groups, the developers and the seniors. Which group do I fit in? I'm a senior and I'm a developer. So there's more than two groups. This is a group, and Lakewood is a very diverse place. And it was diverse when I moved into it in 1979, and it's still diverse now. There's groups with conflicting interests. The seniors don't have families. They don't have children that want to live here. So they're not looking for it. So I think if we could keep it not being divided. And then also, Mr. Klein mentions that things were given away at undervalue. All of the land sales are done legally. The township committee is doing a good job. They have a very difficult job, just like you guys have a difficult job. And for somebody to stand up here and allude to the fact that they made sweetheart deals and that they're doing things wrong, that's just wrong. And I couldn't sit in my seat. So that's the reason I got
Mr. Flannery, you just said that the seniors don't have families. We all have families. We might not have kitties, but we have grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
If you didn't understand what I said the seniors don't have families with children that they want to, families, well, let me clarify, families that they want their children to stay in Lakewood with them. It's a different dynamic. The other issue with the recreation, when we talk about why Oak Street Core went the way it did and that the township didn't provide for recreation, the last master plan, the smart growth plan, it shows lots of areas for recreation. The township committee is trying to do this in a smart fashion. And for people to pick at and say it should have been a park here, it should have been a park there, they need to come to these meetings so that the reports get done that provide the recreation where it's appropriate and the housing where it's appropriate.
Jim Campbell, 6 Rosewood Court, Lakewood. Bill, I do think that was a great report. However, I would say, since it's parks and open space, recreation, and you're looking forward, and you're particularly looking for an area that you might make some money, revenue producing, I have a great idea for you. We might have to wait until tomorrow night for the CAPRA meeting to go right, and they say no, and we put the golf course back up for sale, and Lakewood buys. Thank you.
Carol Supno, 59 Foxwood Road. I was going to wait with my comments, but I think others have opened the door, so my comments are now appropriate. I've lived in Lakewood since 2001. It saddens me that due to the overwhelming high density, putting an insurmountable number of cars on the road, I am now forced to shop out of Lakewood. The last 2 times I tried to travel the 4 miles to the library, it took 45 minutes in each direction. Sadly, I am no longer able to support the businesses in our town. I am no longer able to enjoy the facilities that I could. Garbage collection has just been announced on Route 88 that surrounding streets are going to be collected between the hours of 4 and 10. What next? More high density? We can do garbage collection 24/7.
We are grateful that Lakewood taxes for the third year, and this is attributed to the excess building, has held. But this does not take into account the county and school taxes. So don't be misled by this report. Other problems exist: improper drainage where streets are constantly flooding. Street parking restricts snow removal. We need to fix what is wrong before we add to more problems. And to Mr. Flannery with his report about its traffic, that's the problem. What creates traffic? High-density buildings, squeezing people into small spaces where we have 3 floors of houses and maybe 8 or 10 cars as opposed to 2. It's true, our streets cannot handle more taxes, traffic. It's not doing well handling existing traffic. Accidents seem to be a daily occurrence. There are solutions. Maybe we could build bridges over all our streets and then we could have double streets. Or better yet, let's restrict our neighborhoods. Anybody under 45 can drive certain days, others over 45 can drive the others. Or maybe we can just divide it with the left side of the streets come out on Mondays and the right side comes out on Tuesdays. We have a solution. Respect. I'd appreciate a little respect from the people in the back as we gave you a Laughable solutions? Sure, they're laughable, but no more laughable than high-density building. Until a viable solution takes place and it is proven to work, we implore this town and their boards to have a moratorium on high density and think of the Lakewood citizens presently living here, not those who desire to live here. Mr. Flannery just added that the seniors don't have families living here. Well, when our children come and look around, they would never move here where their children have no place to play. And let's start thinking of the Lakewood citizens who are presently paying taxes, and let's stop lining the pockets of the developers.
Howard Seckno, 59 Foxwood Road. I believe the lectern pounding gentleman was named Mr. Rabinowitz. What he neglected to note is that the senior communities are all one-family houses with one family living in them. We are not allowed to street park. We have to put our garbage cans out of sight. And we don't get pickups for certain holidays. We're extra pickups. We get our once-a-week pickup. It doesn't matter whether it's a Jewish holiday, a Christian holiday, or anything else. We get once a week. After reading,
This is going to be the last. Mr. Sacknow, right? Mr. Sacknow is going to finish what he has to say, and then we're just going to stick to the points. And I don't mean that. And I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but we have an agenda to go through. I don't want to hear about garbage pickup anymore. I don't want to hear about any of that stuff. So please, let's stick to the agenda. This is Parks and Open Space report. If you have a comment on this report, Bill went through his report. If you have a comment, please let us know. If not, go to the next township committee meeting and you can express any views you like. This goes for everybody in the room. Let's stick to the program because we do have an agenda to go through, and I appreciate it, and I have no disrespect towards anybody.
I'll read this later, but I also wanted to say when our grandchildren who are now grown and when our great-grandchildren now come to visit us, we take them to the parks in Toms River. They are beautiful, They are kept up wonderfully, and maybe Lakewood could take a little bit of a lesson from them.
Kayla Cohen, 314 Central Avenue.
Talk into the mic.
Can't hear you, honey. Kayla Cohen, 314 Central Avenue. I am a resident of Lakewood since the 80s. I grew up as a child here in the 80s and the 90s. I'm here actually as a representative of a very large majority of Lakewood, not a senior, not a developer, but many, many people here are about my age group. Most of them right now are putting their children to sleep and bath time so they can't come out. Most of them care about their family life and the well-being of a town, not just for themselves and their friends. You say you have two groups pretty much in the room. Where you can say you have two groups, I would say, is where one group is for themselves and one group is for the future and the general well-being of the town as a whole. And what I can say we should really be thanking, if you want to say the seniors, is that they care about people, and you can say maybe they shouldn't have to worry about it because their kids are grown. They care about the future for everybody, and I think we all owe it to them that they come out and they take their time because they care about something and not their own self and their own money. And that's something I think we need to thank them for. So thank you very much on behalf of my generation, which is thousands of people here who do not like the traffic, who do not like the state station cars, who do not like jumping out from behind the bushes to hurt you, God forbid. This is a majority of the town. You're seeing a small group of people who are in it for themselves, and it's not very fair. So we ask the people who we trust, because we all trust. I don't know all of the parts of who's in charge of what, but you pretty much do, and we really trust you to take care of us, even if we can't make the time to come out every meeting and state our opinion. So thank you for respecting our needs and for doing what you can to help us, and not just the people who are in it for their own power and money who can make the time because for them it's their business to do so. Thank you.
Just before, I see we have just more speakers coming up. Okay. About the Parks and Open Space report. The three speakers that we have online, do you have anything to say about the Parks and Open Space report in particular? I don't want to hear any more about the groups in the room or anything else like that. I want to hear about the Parks and Open Space reports. If anybody has anything else to say about that, please come up. If not, you can wait for the general comments. You can wait till later on. And if you want to talk about the different groups in the room, go ahead. But are you going to talk? And I'm sorry, but okay. Well, let's stick to the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Toby Cohen, 314 Central Avenue.
We can't hear you.
Toby Cohen, 314 Central Avenue. I'm living here many years, almost 4 decades. And my children grew up in this town. And I think we need to talk about breathing spaces, not open spaces at this point. 20 years ago, we moved to a house on Central Avenue, and I have a son who's very into statistics, and he spent an entire day discovering that 5 cars passed in an hour. That was the average. I don't want to tell you what Central Avenue looks like today. Anyone who lives near that vicinity pounds their head against the dashboard of their car every day. Okay, so first of all, we have an issue where everything is being overbuilt, which means that we don't have breathing space. Second of all, when the developers pat themselves on the back and say they have made parks, they have made small playgrounds in tiny pockets of places they've developed, those playgrounds are totally not able to handle the amount of children there, which is why sometimes you'll just find them empty. It's not worth it to go to a place with your 6 kids when there are 3 swings, okay? So, yay for the developers. That's not what we call parks. We do need good open spaces near all the residential areas, and they need to be placed there, and the houses that are around them need to also have open spaces, breathing spaces as I call them. We cannot keep building in a way that doesn't leave room for children to grow up healthily. We take away all the trees, bye-bye the oxygen. We take away everything we need, including the problem the Parks Department has is that it does not hire people who know how to take care of this town. You talk about Lake Carousel, gosh, this is the 3rd time I'm up here talking about how the township last year mowed once. And when they came at the end of the summer to fix things up. The weeds on the boardwalk were higher than, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln if he had lived here. And they've tried to cut them down. The place is a disaster, it's a mess. No one even wants to run around the lake. I walk around all the parks in this town. Somebody mentioned, I think it's John Patrick, that one, which is off Vine Street, kind of. Can everybody go? All right, well, let me tell you something. I walk there all the time. One day I was walking this, the first time I went this spring to walk there, and guess what? Oh, at the end of it, I see developments. Yes. There are houses already backing up on them, okay? And I'm waiting for old fences to go down and everything to be wrecked because no one cares about the open spaces. People care about stuffing a lot of people into place and then wondering why they're gonna all get sick from it one day. This is something that has to be addressed seriously, not just open space, but what's around the open space. And the trees have to stop getting cut down all over the place. I'm not gonna talk about and I will mention to you that as I walked up the stairs here to come in, one of your lovely bushes is choked with weeds. So whoever you're hiring from your public works to take care of this place doesn't know a weed from a flower. And not only that, it was a fir, it was a cedar type of juniper bush, and it's full of leafy weeds. Trust me, he should know better, whoever he
I
or
gotta
she
say
is.
one thing.
Thank you. Yes.
Thankfully, none of us hire anybody from public.
No, but please get that message to them. Please, whoever's being hired, better know what they're doing because the lake is a disaster.
Hi, Malcolm Graydon, Siena Way. I grew up in Los Angeles, so it's a little bit of an outside perspective. I grew up, and most people I think in the room would agree Los Angeles is a beautiful city. And I get questioned all the time why I don't move back. I grew up in Los Angeles, there was one park in the 3 or 4 square miles in the area that I live. Still a beautiful city, but there was just one park. I came here, my kids go to Brook Park because that's the closest park to where I live. One day we were driving down Route 88 and I said, well, this side is this lake and that side is the other park. This is square miles of park that don't exist in Los Angeles, which is, most people would be happy to live there. The other thing is by trade, I am a landscaper and thankfully very busy. And what I am busy with generally, and it sounds like I'm up here because I'm biased to the builders, but I do a lot of private homeowner work. I'm here because, as a general rule, whenever there's a township, whenever there's a project they're required to put up X amount of trees for whatever they replaced or whatever they took away to put back, those trees are always accounted for, obviously, and they're on a plan. And in general, this idea of pulling out and not replacing is simply untrue.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. So, at this time, but we have somebody else?
Oh, sorry, just 2 minutes. As we do developing in town.
Your name?
How about your name?
And into the mic.
Aaron Mansour, 711 Park Avenue, Lakewood, New Jersey, 08701. I've done a couple projects here in town.
Just talking to the mic so everybody.
I've done several projects here in town, as the planning board members know that. I came back with applications, I can show you a few applications many times, even to pull out homes if it didn't make sense on the project, to give quality life and development. Now, we do all know that there is some traffic issues and things like that. Many that, in a sense, that should get taken care of, and I think a lot of developers together collectively will help out with the township getting those resolved. And there are where I grew up in Brooklyn is Avenue N and Ocean Parkway. When I grew up at age 10, there was one light at Ocean Parkway, one light in Coney Island. I grew up at age 13, there was another light on East 7th, East 9th. I grew up a little older, there was another light put up. As more development comes, the traffic patterns change. Over here, the traffic patterns are not changing that much, that there are creative...
I mean to interrupt you. Everything you say about the nobody's on trial here. So if anybody has anything more to say about the parks and open space, what I love to hear, I don't want to hear about traffic, and I don't want to hear about density, and I don't want to hear about planning board meetings.
You deserve a medal.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Please, only talk about this.
One short question. My name is Mike Friedman from Academy Street. I'd just like to know if there is a formula that you work with to try to provide a certain amount of park area for a certain amount of people, or are you even making a recommendation like something like that in the plans of how the development of Lake was going to be? So we shouldn't have to just argue about we have enough parks. We don't have enough parks. We have some type of formula that will tell us that we do or we don't.
You pose a very interesting question. We had difficulty trying to determine what exactly is the population of Lakewood, because that's the first component you need to determine how much recreation space we have, and then what those recreational spaces offer. Not all of them offer a full array of amenities. So we concentrated on what we had, and we're trying to listen for the complaints. We advertise meetings on the website all the time. At the 2 open meetings we had for park and recreation, at one meeting, 8 people arrived. In the next meeting, 1 person arrived. Now, I would think that we would have filled that room with residents that wanted to know what we were doing about recreation and open space. I was appalled to find out that perhaps that wasn't on their agenda. It wasn't on their interest list. They didn't come to the meeting. They never voiced their opinion. So in lieu of that, the members of the committee, the subcommittee, in discussions with our engineers, took what we had at hand, looked at it very closely, tried to determine where the complaints were coming from, what was possibly underutilized, what was being utilized properly. We even heard a horror story that one of the parks requires that you register to use it in Bricktown. What? Why would we go to Bricktown to reserve a time at a Lakewood park? These are the things that have to be addressed. We're not going to automatically say because the population here is 120, we need 20 parks. Because the township committee would look at us and say, are you a contributor towards this? Where are we going to get that money? Because we must maintain a budget without killing our residents with additional taxes. So we have to be careful what we wish for. We might get it. The idea here is, in lieu of major complaints, I have to assume that we're doing pretty good. We do have amenities, and they're spread throughout the community. If there's areas of Lakewood that need recreation, open space, boy, I want to hear it. And I hope that you tell the township committee that you need recreation and open space. This used to be Lakewood, but I'm hearing it now is Lakeview because all the wood is gone. Now, the idea here is, this can't be just done by committees. It takes you and you and you and you. Every one of us have to get together and say, this is our demand. This is our home. This is where we live. We have special needs for our children, for our families. We want these things, and they should be part and parcel of every new development. Anywhere that there is not a park, there should be a park, and we'll figure out how to get that cash. And I don't mind a bit assessing the builders and the contractors for some money to help subsidize that fragile budget that they're dealing with today.
I would just like to note that many people in Lakewood do not go onto websites. And if you want to advertise a meeting, you have to find another way to do it.
But see, that's the means and mechanism that the
I
township
know,
has.
but this is a different type of community, and we try to avoid the web, as they call it. So it's not really fair to us. I'm sure that the Jewish members on the can explain that to you. The only other thing is, this is a master plan, so I would think that there's a master plan, there has to be an idea of what we actually want to structure. What kind of structure do we want? You sound like you're a ad hoc type of plan, rather than a master plan that has a goal in mind when you first sit down to discuss it. That's the only reason I asked you the question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Aaron Hirsch. Mr. Habde, you had just mentioned there was one person at one meeting and 8 at another meeting?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and where was this advertised?
Well, yeah, we advertise it, and like the gentleman that preceded you said, we advertise it on the township website. That is the announcement of record. Now, in a community as diverse as Lakewood, perhaps we have to do the next ones a little different. Perhaps there has to be notice somewhere else, but all that costs money. The idea here is that they chose the township website because it was thought that that would be the source of information for all things township.
If the township website was very user-friendly, people might consider going there. Perhaps we need to recommend to the township that they perhaps set up like an email list for township events. It of course sends out a blast to people like this. They are aware of it because a lot of people don't know to go look. Well, let me see what's happening this week at the township. It might be just tweaking sometimes the notification can make a world of difference. Because I bet there's a lot of people, from what I hear, would be interested in showing up these committees, and it's a waste of time and energy when you don't have most of the people that really do care that don't even have any clue that this is happening. Thank you.
I think you're right, Mr. Hurst. Thank you very much for your commentary. And I think we should endeavor to get that message out.
We have to be more transparent in letting people know about these meetings.
Thank you.
Joanne Krashansky, 137 Sophie Lane. With all due respect to this advisory board, to you, Mr. Hobday, I would like to say, I know that the parks are important to all of our children, not only our children, the community as a whole, but the parks are the least of our worries. Okay? We have a lot of things going on in Lakewood that should be addressed by the senior community, by the Orthodox community, and nothing is being resolved. And the parks, like I said, are very important, but we have many more worse problems than that. And I think that it's time Lakewood, the politicians, whoever else is involved, tries to bring the communities together. Sit down, try to have some kind of understanding between the communities. Otherwise, nothing's ever going to change. And that's a sad story.
Shlomo Friedman, 30 Blue Jay Way. Shlomo Friedman, 30 Blue Jay Way, Lakewood, New Jersey. I've been living in Lakewood for 15 years, and as everyone, I've seen the growth. I want to talk about parks and open space because it is a very important thing. I agree with one of the previous speakers that said they go to Tom's River when they want parks and open space because it's pretty there and it's nicer. And I too sometimes use Tom's River Parks, which I live close by, to take my kids there. I want to point out something a little bit different. 15 years ago, we denied the growth that took place in the last 15 years, and we didn't plan ahead. And we're doing the same thing again today. We are just burying our head in the sand and saying, we're going to take back Lakewood, we're going to stop the growth. Well, Mr. Havday, I heard you were confused about population number in Lakewood. Well, if it's 100,000 now, plan for 200,000 or 300,000. Statistics show that a place that's nice and a town that people like to live in grows. It's happened everywhere else in the United States of America. It's going to happen in Lakewood too. It's a beautiful place to live in, and people from Lakewood want to stay in Lakewood, and their kids want to stay in Lakewood. We have a very small percentage of our kids that are moving out of Lakewood.
Stay here.
Yeah, I'm talking about parks and open space. 10-second close, 10-second close. What I'm saying is that if we're going to plan for parks and open space for our current population, we're going to have a problem just in 5 years from today, not even longer than that, or less. Parks and open space in more densely populated areas look different than parks and open space in less densely populated areas. And our population is growing. We got to plan accordingly. And it would be a good idea. The developers aren't as bad as people portray them to be. I'm just suggesting if we can work together with the developers for our parks and open space so we can plan for the growth that will happen. Thank you.
I just have one comment. I keep hearing people saying about how they're going to Tom's River and other places. If you haven't visited the parks in Lakewood, you're missing out. Ocean County Park, Lake Shenandoah Park, Pine Park, they're incredible. We have an issue with not enough active recreation. We've known that for a long time. And I support the subcommittee for the work that they've done to try and increase that. But for anybody to give the idea that you have to leave Lakewood to find beautiful parks is absolutely showing you don't know our parks. And if I may also say that our Public Works Department, including Phil Rue, who's in charge of the Park Department, is incredibly dedicated, does a beautiful job, and I think that we shouldn't have anybody leave here with the impression that they're other than professionals.
Hi, my name is Hadassah Buxbaum. I own a home in Lakewood approximately a little over 10 years. I currently live in the Enclave, which is on the southern end of Lakewood, and it's to the west of Route 9. And in that specific area, we have a lot of representatives here. You have 2 other senior developments, and none of our developments, although they're beautifully maintained in the grass, they're not really designed for children and grandchildren. It would be very nice when considering parks, small parks. I know the property was just vacated on Massachusetts Avenue, right between Lake Ridge and Fairways and across from Enclave. Maybe we can find whether that plot or some other, an area where we can have a few swings, where we can take our children and our grandchildren, and maybe just some benches. And I don't think that would be very costly.
Thank you, ma'am.
Carol Dunbar, and this is specifically about parks and recreation. We've been talking about recreation and parks for children. Has there been given any consideration for recreation for adults, similar to the program that Brick has during the summer, where they bring in entertainers?
That wasn't the charter for this particular committee.
We can talk a little bit about that when we get to the senior community needs report. And if you want to come back up, we can.
Well, it doesn't have to be senior, it's just adult community.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I meant if we can try to incorporate that if one of the reports.
Great.
I think I know where we can do it.
Terrific.
Thank you.
If I can, let me tell you what the subcommittees are.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My concern is that if you want to, and we should, have parks, then we have to set aside property now for the future in order to make those parks for the growth that we're gonna have when we're allowing builders to put up high-density housing. So we have to now look at the structure of the town, the infrastructure, and decide, do we have the right roads and everything else to get to the park? We need all these things before we can consider anything. We need to stop doing what we're doing. We're talking parks. Tell me how we're gonna have parks if we're giving the land away for building. Tell me, I'd like to know how you do that. Right, we're talking parks. How do you do that? Let's talk in fairness. Let's be fair to all the citizens in Lakewood. No groups, there's no groups. We all live here, and we're all entitled to freedom here. You come to a town, you shouldn't have to come to a microphone every few weeks to fight for our rights. It's our right to have quality of life. It's our right to have safety for our children and families. There's a lot of people here, but there's more that couldn't make it tonight. And I'm representing many of those people. They're fed up. You're the planning board. This is a very important meeting. Excuse me, the master plan, well, it's about the master plan, correct? Okay, that's what I'm referring to. So we need to know what's set aside and say, no building here. This is dedicated for parks. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we can discuss the Parks and Open Space report. I'm going to make a suggestion to the committee. We don't need a formal vote on the report, but we need to adopt the report at least by voice vote from the advisory board. So there were two suggestions that I'd like to suggest that we incorporate in the report. Number one, that Bill talks about a Parks Commission in his report, and somebody brought up the fact that whatever money is brought into the commission should stay with the parks. I agree with that. I think that's an excellent idea. So that was the only one suggestion that I had that should be incorporated into the formal report. If any other board members have anything else that you want to incorporate into the report?
I know Mr. Rabinowitz had made a request. Is that something that we want to consider?
That's up to the board. If the board wants to consider that the vacation of the right-of-ways within the Ocean Corridor, will it provide parks?
We need the streets. Why are you vacating it?
Well, that was the idea.
Let us give different.
Wait, could you ask them to be quiet?
Yeah.
I can't even hear you guys, I'm sitting right here.
Yeah, we can't, we have to be able to talk one at a time. That was something that was part of the counter application, from what I understand. So if you want to consider that, it's up to the board. I mean, it's already part of the application, but the board wants to reiterate that in the report. Okay, is that, no? Okay, so, okay, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do a vote to accept the Parks and Open Space report? We'll include the whatever money's collected should stay with the Parks Commission if the township so chooses to create a Parks Commission, and then the other issue of vacation of the right-of-ways, we'll leave it up to the vote. Well, no, do we want to incorporate that into our report or not? That's the question.
What I would like to see incorporated into the report is a strong recommendation to develop moving that budget to a committee that can manage parks, recreation, and open space. I think it's embedded in public works and it gets no attention there. And I think that it needs more attention than Scott. And I would think that the budget be transferred and it be augmented by the recommendation for a $25 fee for each application, each permit.
What does everybody feel about that?
I agree with you. I don't agree with it. I think you're creating bureaucracy.
Folks,
for something that exists.
We need the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves also, so you can listen, please, but please just let us talk amongst ourselves because we do have to formalize this.
With all due respect, you're going to create more bureaucracy, more another division to do the same thing that you already have people dedicated to. It's in public works. The public works director was to come to the township committee and say, Parks is too big for me. You have to make it into its own thing. Then I say, great. If you want to help fund it with this fee, also great. But the idea that we should recommend that the township create another layer while not eliminating what they have in public works. And if we are advocating that they eliminate what they have in public works, I don't think that's our, we're supposed to set a vision for things to happen. The mechanics of it, the pension committee and their departments to figure out.
Our issue is that it's not being taken care of. And the fact that, so just to finish, because I gave you the floor. Thank you, okay. The issue is that the funds seem to be buried. We can't ferret them out. When they're not line items that we can identify. If we don't do that, if we can't identify the funds and they're not properly allocated, you know they're going to get spent elsewhere. So by asking to have it against a specific mission, we're giving it a specific use. That enables it to be measured to see if it's being accurately monitored and actually being accomplished.
So it's a wonderful idea, but it's not accurate. Actually, the budgets are lined up by their departments. They have a road budget, they have a parks budget. It's defined. Whether they spend it or not, it's a different issue. So we're talking about advocacy to the township committee to prioritize the value of parks, expand parks, invest in them. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. But if we're talking about some way to work around somebody's reticence to spend money on parks, this is going to be a plan that will fail.
So what's your suggestion?
My suggestion is that we advocate for the township to give an added priority to parks, to recognize that with the growing population that we have, with all those children outgrowing the top blocks and outgrowing the park, and needing active recreation, that we need more focused investment in active recreation in the larger parks, just like they're doing in Brook Park now. They're running water in there, they're going to have irrigation, they're going to put things in there. They're investing in that infrastructure because there's a recognition that's needed. And it may not be enough, but it's that kind of focus and dedication that's required. I think our best thing to do is say, listen, this is what we need. We suggest that you look for land for parks, and we suggest that you continue to put programs in place that allow people to make the most use of the parks that we have. All those recommendations I'm all for. Creating another layer of independent bureaucracy to run the parks through, by proxy, through public works employees. Just doesn't make sense.
Why do we need it? We need a strong spokesperson for parks, open space, and recreation. I don't think that's coming out of the Department of Public Works. Without a strong voice and an advocacy, it's never going to get any better.
But if I may, there is a parks committee now. There has been one for years. Members of that committee have not been shy about coming to potential committee meetings and saying, we need you to invest in the parks. So if that committee is not strong enough, maybe we could recommend to the township committee that they refresh it, bring in some new blood, bring in some of the younger people who are really sensitive to the idea that the children are growing up in these places to play.
That wasn't done. That was not the charter. The charter was to be the subcommittee that makes a recommendation to the master plan committee. The master plan committee recommends that to the planning board. The planning board then shares this with the township committee. If I, as the chairman of this subcommittee, came before the township committee and said, you're not paying attention to Parks and Recreation, they would say to me, have you talked to the chairman of the master plan committee? And I would look around and say, gee, no, but do you think I should? So the idea here, my recommendation is very strong. It's not being handled, it's not being managed, they're letting it deteriorate. Public Works is not the place to have it because it's the bottom of their list. They're concerned more with their primary jobs. And what is left goes to Park and Recreation, and we see the results of that.
I agree with Bill.
That's right.
Through the chair. Just, I think Mr. Ryman is probably more knowledgeable than the rest of us on this. You say that in the budget for public work, let's say, there is a line item for roads, there is a line item for parks and recreation, is that correct?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then perhaps, and I don't know if this is already part of the process of the budgeting or the spending in the department, but are things earmarked specifically for those items, or can they use them for other things?
I can't tell you in detail how each line of budget works, but again, I think what we're all saying is maybe there hasn't been enough emphasis on attention to the parks. And the question before us is, what is the solution? Is the solution strip that activity out of public works and create a new separate, somehow, bureaucracy to run that and operate it? I think it would be unwieldy. But the effect, if the result is achieved, I'm all for it.
So my proposal is that perhaps a compromise where I agree with more bureaucracy doesn't usually end up with better results. Perhaps there can be a recommendation from the committee that the public, whether they do or not, I don't know, that's something we have to find out, I guess, but that the money that's, whatever line item goes into the Parks and Recreation should be either by ordinance, or if it's not already done, or whatever it is, earmarked and kept for that purpose and not spent on other things. And that will satisfy probably what you're looking for, Mr. Hobden, and also not create another layer of bureaucracy.
So with all due respect, the dollars are there. I think there are insufficient dollars. However, it comes down to time, material, and personnel. Do I have someone to dispatch to this park, or all 11 of those parks? Do I have a monthly report coming back to say this park is in disrepair? No. How do I know that this is ready for children to go to that park in safety with confidence and know that they can use that park? There's no feedback on that. That's why when everybody's in charge, no one's in charge. Put somebody in charge and manage the budget.
I think you're right, Bill. I think the word bureaucracy is being used, and it's true, we are building to a degree, another layer, but we're also calling it accountability. And accountability is what really is going to breed success on whether these dollars are spent correctly or not. That's why I believe.
Hi.
So,
okay. I agree with Steve. I don't like another level of bureaucracy. I just want to point out one thing. Some very strong words were used as far as some of the parks in town, and I think it's just important to mention that Steve said that Public Works is out there every day. They're doing the best they can. They're doing a good job. I think it's important that we recognize that. Some words like disaster and mess, and I think the lake is beautiful. I walk around the lake. I walk around a lot of the parks. And I think that there are parks in Lakewood that are beautiful. And I'm generally against another level of bureaucracy, though I'm for accountability, which I think you mentioned. So if we can enforce accountability.
I would ditto what he just said. In my experience, I found that every time you add another level of bureaucracy, you're spending more money. It's going to cost the taxpayers more money. They save money by combining it with other services, and but that doesn't excuse the lack of accountability, which definitely has to be there. And perhaps there can be some levels of accountability that can be put into place to make sure that it is properly taken care of.
So, Steve brought up a good point that there's an existing parks committee in town, and Bill's talking about more of a commission. I don't think Bill's talking about a commission that actually has their own equipment and personnel and all that. And I think what we are talking about is building in stronger accountability, because whenever you have a commission or a board that's charged with taking care of a certain item, there is accountability. You can have a chairman of that commission. There could be a monthly review or a bi-monthly review of the conditions of some of the parks in the town. They could actually split up the town, let's say, by the year, and every 3 months we're going to do this section, then that section. And then there's going to be stronger accountability, I think, built into that. Not that they have their own equipment and personnel that actually physically maintain the parks, and they're not going to be doing that. But if there's a question to the Public Works Director, to the Supervisor of Parks, they'll be able to reach out to them, and just really somebody to take ownership of it, right? I mean, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody to take ownership of it. Right, no, I think we're just talking about a group of volunteers that take ownership of it, people that feel passionate about it. And I think that's a good thing.
If the chair, if the proposal is to take the Parks and Open Space Committee and make it a commission?
An oversight.
Okay, good. Yeah, it gives stronger accountability. Okay. Okay. Very good. So, guess we'll, let's start from Mr. Landon. Again, this is not a planning board, zoning board where formal votes are required, but we're gonna do a vote to formally accept and adopt the Parks and Open Space Subcommittee report. With the recommendations, which I know Mr. Slahetka has been paying attention, so, thank you.
Yes, I'm in support with those recommendations.
I'm also in favor.
Yes.
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 Okay. Next subcommittee, next, but I think we'll give them a break, so we'll wait on that. You want to take a vote? Okay, so the next report we're going to do, that was a joke by the way, Bill's next subcommittee is purposely last on the agenda because I knew that we need to give him a break. The next subcommittee report is the Transportation Subcommittee. We're gonna do the same format. I'm really asking everybody, members of the public, if you want to comment on the report, please be objective. Try to give us comments which are going to be positive comments, something that we can really consider including into the report. And let's just try to be as objective as possible. Again, I don't want to limit anybody, but let's do our best.
What time is this over? Whenever they want. This is ridiculous. I'm hard.
The board, we're going to do one more, because if it's going to be 2 hours of report, we're going to have to make more meetings, so. Which is fine, we're okay with that, but at least it's not. Okay, so the chairman of this subcommittee was Steve Ryman. Thank you. Steve, you want to give us your
I'm going to
highlights?
speak very quickly.
Through the chair, and Justin, do you plan on getting through all the reports? Because if not, perhaps just to tell the audience now that.
Well, let's see how the timing goes with this report, and if we can get through it, we'll get through it, and we can do another one. If not, we'll have to stop, and we'll schedule another meeting.
So, I'll speak with, I don't have to do the preambles, everybody understands that we were tasked with, this is called the circulation element of the master plan, and it's meant to look at the facilities in the town for all modes of transportation, particular sensitivity obviously to everybody here. I don't know how many of you came by bus or train, but for most of you who came by car, it's a big issue here in town. And so we look at, and I should say before I get into the specifics, the subcommittee was myself, Reverend Lieberman, Mike McNeil, Adam Pfeffer, and Alan Morris, and I want to thank them all for their work on the subcommittee, as well as Stan and Marty Truscott for working with us. I'm just going to hit on a couple of highlights. These plans have been on the township website for anybody who has access, and for anybody who doesn't. I think there are a couple of hard copies laying around here. But I'm just going to hit on a few of them and then read through many pages. One of the high priorities that's been identified even in the past, but maybe is even more sensitive now, is the idea of widening opportunities. Everybody's heard about the plans and the hopes for widening Route 9, and to whatever extent that will happen, it'll be wonderful. But there are other roads in town that we have identified, like County Line Road, East Kennedy Boulevard, and so on, that need to be kept with proper setbacks to protect for eventual widening. Those roads that are not yet more than one lane in either direction, or even where they are maybe 2 lanes in either direction, but the use of those roads cries out for more widening. It's important from a zoning perspective that the town has in their long-term plans to keep setbacks significant. If you go down Route 9, you'll see that everybody's fairly far, every building is for most of Route 9, fairly far setback. I think it's 100 to 150 foot setback, with an eye towards when the government can acquire some of that frontage and actually put in additional lanes of roads. So that was one of the priorities that we touched on. Another one is that as the town developed, and certainly we saw a lot of it over the last 10 years, that as a lot of the residential developments were put in, cul-de-sacs were all the rage. And there were many streets that were not designed as cul-de-sacs, became de facto cul-de-sacs. And our subcommittee is recommending to the master plan committee that wherever roads are part of a grid setup and are not closed for any viable purpose, but rather just because they are, that they be open. And we've identified a number of those roads at Vine Street and Arlington Avenue that we recommend be open to assist with the flow in a number of areas where it's extremely congested. Another thing that we've put in is a recommendation to the extent that we can, some people aren't here anymore, but the RSIS, the standards for road characteristics that are used in our planning board and planning of streets and developments, we're asking that the master plan include a recommendation to exceed road widths for RSIS standards. Anybody going through any of our developments will see that parking typically takes place on both sides of the street, and buses and fire trucks and so on have an extremely hard time getting through if they can at all. So many of those streets were built to the standards. We think we need to exceed the standards wherever possible so that we can have a decent flow. Another thing is something that's already in the works of the township committee, but we would strongly recommend that the township implement the transportation improvement district throughout the town. A few years ago, the town began, in New Jersey, you can't just decide to put an impact fee on developers. You may say, well, the developers are making us need to expand the roads or put in traffic lights, and we want to hit them with a fee and put it in a fund and fund this activity, which is a great idea, but under New Jersey law, it won't go. There is something called a Transportation Improvement District where a study is done, and it identifies all the improvements that will be needed based on the maximum density that's anticipated in an area. We've divided the town into, I think, 4 or 6 segments, and we've already done the planning on 2 of those segments, which are the 2 segments being most heavily built in over the last few years and probably for the next few years. And the entire plan is in place, except for the fee schedule. The fee schedule has not yet been adopted by the township committee. I believe it's on the first or second reading right now, and hopefully it will be adopted soon, because that will create a fund where every unit built, whatever it may be, will pay money into that dedicated fund. That fund will pay for traffic lights, road widenings, things that have been identified specifically in the plan. And I believe that plan is, since it was adopted, it is available for anybody. I don't know if it's posted on the website, but if it is, you can call the manager's office. We'll make it available to everybody, and I think it will be helpful. The next item that we made a recommendation on is mass transit. And when people talk about infrastructure not being sufficient in the town, one of the earlier speakers in the previous item spoke about how hard it is to drive. I don't really know what that has to do with park, but they were talking about the fact that even now it's hard. And increased development will make it that much harder to drive. There will never be enough roads possible to build unless we do, like the lady said, double-decker roads. Short of that, you can. There isn't enough land in Lakewood to accommodate all the roads that will need to be built to make it manageable for car traffic. The only solution for us in terms of an infrastructure is to invest in a mass transit system. And whether that's buses, trains, or other, I don't think we can do subway here. But we need to find somewhere to find more investment, and we want to make that a critical part of our advocacy, is that the town increase the bus service that we started, that we continue to strongly advocate for the MOM line, the Monmouth Ocean Middlesex, for restarting passenger traffic along the rail line, which will allow commuters to have more options for how to get from Lakewood to New York City or North Jersey. And then looking at other things that we can do once a mass transit system is in place. We want to do everything we can to encourage people to use it. And there are many things that can be done for that. Lakewood also, a few years ago, adopted something called the Complete Streets Resolution. That's a New Jersey Department of Transportation initiative that addresses many things having to do with safety, pedestrian safety, bicyclist safety, and good flow of traffic. And there are a number of recommendations in there that we strongly recommend that the town pursue. Traffic calming, things that can be done in the design of a downtown, for example, to encourage safety for the pedestrians. We would love part of the downtown to be more like a walking mall than a speed strip as much as possible. People cross the streets, it's really dangerous, and there are things that can be implemented, they're not all that costly, to actually increase safety in the downtown and make it a better place for people to live. So a couple of points just off the specific recommendations that are in front of everybody. Actively support efforts focused on the reactivation of passenger rail service from Lakewood Township to multiple regional destinations, including New York City. Clarify future residential roadways to exceed the RSIS, residential site improvement standards. Encourage creative techniques to control motor vehicle speed in the downtown area and all residential neighborhoods. And designate and encourage the development of pedestrian corridors and bikeways that link residential neighborhoods with schools, parks, community facilities, and public transit. And one of the things that people who drive through this town will see is there's, besides for pedestrians of adult age, there's thousands and thousands of kids, many of them hitchhiking and doing other things, and we have to find a way to have safe passage for each pedestrian, and certainly for bicyclists. Somebody said, I think it was Bill, who said if a bicyclist tries to go on a county road, they might not be here the next day. We want to encourage it, not just on East Kennedy Boulevard, where we strongly encourage the prior recommendation to maintain that area as a safe biking and pedestrian way, but throughout the town, we would encourage the township committee, through the master plan committee, to look for places where we can implement bike lanes and other safety features.
Thank you, Steve. That was a good, your report was an excellent report. Thank you and the members of the subcommittee. Any, did we do the public first last time, or did we do the board? We did the board first, okay. Any members of the advisory board want to comment on Steve's report? It was very comprehensive and good, okay. Quietness, okay, good. Anybody from the public want to comment on Steve's report?
Noreen Gill, 192 Coventry Drive. Steve, you lived in Coventry years ago, okay? It was nice. It's not nice now, County Line Road or Kennedy Boulevard. And actually, it's not safe. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of men on a bicycle carrying a little cage in the back with a child. Okay, this is the newest thing in Lakewood. Hauling the child wherever they're going with a cage. It's like a little cage with a seat in it, and there's a young baby in it. County line. It's a carrier attached, but it's
or a baby.
A baby. It's a carrier attached, but you can see right through it. It's screened. Now, if a car comes and hits that, hey, you want a bicycle on County Line Road? And this is just starting up now, and there are more bicycles. And there is a need for transportation. We all agree for that. Years ago, I came to the township and I begged them for mass transportation. They had 9 buses, okay, that they were supposed to get. They were going to do this, that, and everything. That didn't solve the problem, okay? Right now, the arteries in Lakewood are Route 9, north and south, County Line Road, east and west, New Hampshire and Ridge. Some people now have taken a liking to using Sunset, or not Sunset, that road alongside the lake going out Massachusetts, and they cut off the lake across New Central, and they go down, I don't know if that's Sunset Road or what, but let me tell you something, if anybody has any dreams of ever making that road a main road for transportation, forget it, it's so bad. We need mass transportation, we needed it years ago. The problem lies therein when the master plan of 1999 recommendations were that we should have a bike lane, okay? And that was all well and good. However, the town built up. Now, I'm looking at it in a different light. I'd like to see bicycle lanes, but I have a picture on my new cell phone, which I don't want to tell you how much I paid for, only because I could take better pictures, of people walking in the street and sidewalks are on the other side, okay? I have the picture. In the street, and a person making a right-hand turn and doesn't expect to see 5 men in a street and comes this close to hitting them, okay? We have bigger problems in this town, okay? Now I see the bicycles pulling the attachments. My heart was in my throat when I saw this. It's not only one person. This is the new trend in Lakewood, to transport young children. It's very bad. And I've only seen it in the area that I live in. Honestly, I have not seen it in any other area. Okay, there's no room on County Line Road, even if they widen it. But this new addition to the bicycles in Lakewood, I'm thinking of talking to the township committee, and I don't know if we can do anything about prohibiting it. A child's life with the driving in Lakewood and a baby in a carrier behind a bicycle attached to a bicycle, and it's not that it's going straight. When he made the corner, I thought it was going to tip over. We need mass transportation, Steve. I think that's got to be a priority. When I brought that up years ago, I was told, and this is what I was told, because I was at the 99 master plan and the other 2 and now this one. I was told that it wouldn't work, and for 3 reasons. We have a lot of yeshivas around here, and the men have to take the children and pick them up at a certain time. And that mass transportation was not going to be of help to them, because they had to take their children to sitters in the morning and after school and everything else. So I said, well, maybe there's some other way, you know? And other schools get out at certain times. Well, I was told it's not going to benefit the community at large. But right now, the community is suffering with traffic. So we have to be sincere, and we really have to move forward on mass transportation. The other issue I see we have is going down Clifton Avenue, the side streets, right by Clifton Avenue grade school, and the street opposite it. I use that street a lot, Clifton Avenue. 2 cars simultaneously coming out at the same time, and I'm going south. The streets are headed towards one another. We need parking and streets only one way and parking on one side. Okay? By the Little League field, I had to watch an ambulance try to get by there and couldn't get down the street because the yeshiva right there, the cars were parked on both sides, and some of them were sticking out in the road. But he's at the other end of the street and had to wait for one car to come down until he could get down. Now, I don't know if that was the route he had to take, if it was close. I don't know where he was going. But even Route 9, there's no room for the ambulances. I think a designated lane or something should be made towards the hospital. I think at this point in time, if we have to designate a lane, it should be for the fire trucks to get down Route 9, and I think we should only have parking on one side of the streets and one-way streets made in Lakewood. That can help tremendously. And I think that has to be looked at very closely. And in these developments, yes, the roads should be wider. And when they come before the boards, and they say, oh, you're gonna be allowed 22 parking spaces under the risk, but no on-street parking. Okay, they give them, a shul recently got 6 parking places. I have, by me, 7 shuls, 5 schools, and County Line Road, and Astor Avenue, and Walmart, there's nowhere to park. And another shul is going up on County Line Road and part of Berkowitz. We can't handle the traffic. Mass transportation is important, however, I don't know how it will blend with the community at large. I would like to have it, but it's, for the people that live in Lakewood, some of the people, it's not gonna benefit them because they have, they have other things they have to attend to at a certain time of the day. So I'm still of the opinion that we need it, and if it's workable, but you've got to do these side streets. You can't have parking on both sides of the side streets. That's got to stop.
Thank you, Noreen. There are recommendations for only one side of street parking and one-way streets, which will be part of a future report coming in the GM. Make the streets one way. Doesn't reach that far.
Not in a few minutes.
I also want to talk about the mass transportation bus.
My name is Vivian Friedman. I live at 318 Forest Avenue. I have 3 things I want to say. One is that I think that Lakewood not so much has a density problem, but it has a traffic problem. I do believe, I know it's not such a popular sentiment, but I do believe it's separate. I live in what they call Yeshiva area, which is arguably one of the more congested areas in town. Within a 4-block radius of my house is primarily apartments, townhouses, very few single-family homes, and they're all in very small lots. However, I chose to live in that neighborhood because I love the density. I think Lakewood is a beautiful town. It's a beautiful town to raise a family. My children can walk to the lake. My oldest is 14 years old. He can walk to the lake. He can boat in the lake. He can bike around the lake. He can walk to Clifton Avenue. He has a ton of friends in the neighborhood. Walk to all his friends. Walk to shul. It is so nice to have family and friends that are close by. A lot of my siblings live near us. We can walk to each other. My children can walk to them. To live on 1-acre lots when you're raising a family is very challenging. Everything is far apart. It's hard for people to get where they need. A lot of from people choose to live in these highly dense areas like Yeshiva area and Ridge because they want the density. I think that the Take Back Lakewood movement has been making a lot of noise and saying that nobody wants density, but I know the other person mentioned that she's talking for a lot of people who couldn't come because they're taking care of their children. Well, my children are home and I came because I feel it's so important. There are a lot of us, I want to say about the traffic, that there are a lot of us who believe that the traffic is horrendous. I will never say that traffic in Lakewood is good. But if you look at where the traffic is, Route 9, County Line Road, the reason there's a lot of traffic is because there are no other through streets that cut through. Everybody is congested on the exact same street. Yeshiva area, I drive to Ridge every single day. My son is in a playgroup on Ridge. There is almost no traffic besides for the 9:30, the 2 o'clock where it's a logistical problem. It's not a traffic problem. Every single street cuts through. If I see a garbage truck on 5th Street, I could take 6th Street. If there's cars on 6th Street, I could take 7th Street. There are so many ways to cut through that it eliminates a lot of the bottlenecks. If you have only cul-de-sacs coming in, which I think was addressed in your plan, cul-de-sacs coming in from all sides, it creates a terrible congestion, and that's what creates the problem with the traffic. And adding more density without addressing these through streets obviously would create much more traffic problems, but if we can create much more through streets, much more traffic cutting across multiple, like if Kennedy Boulevard would go all the way through, County Line would not be so crowded. There would be other ways to go. That was point number 1, sorry. The other idea I have, which is a little bit of an offbeat idea, but I wanted to just mention it, is the L shuttle, which we had hoped would take a lot of the congestion off the road, but because of the limited route that it runs, it's very, very hard to service a lot of people. When they were doing the track repair on the railroad, on the Conrail Road, I noticed that they had a truck that drove on the sidewalk and then made a turn onto the tracks, and it had tiny wheels that like locked into the tracks, and they were able to drive down the tracks to do the repairs. So everyone hopes the Mom Line might eventually come, but until it does, maybe we could look into shuttles that drive on the tracks and cut through, so you could get to Ridge, you could get to Sunset, you could get to Cross Street. It's just an offbeat.
Creative idea, but we have to ask Conrail. It's their practice, not theirs.
So it just a way of making.
I do want to say thank you. You brought out another point, which is being able to walk to things. And one of the guiding principles that Stan could talk about a lot more, but I'll just say it real quick. One of the guiding principles of smart growth planning is that you should have whatever you need close by so you can walk more places. In Lakewood, sometimes it's one practical way to get to things. So if you want to get to the lakes and you're back close, at least you don't have to get in your car to go there. Not much of the town is laid out in the grid pattern that you described from Forest Avenue to Ridge. You can go down that grid. That's a very convenient thing. There are a few other pockets in town where there are grid streets, and that's one of our recommendations. Don't close them up. Wherever they exist and they're not open them to help with the flow of traffic. But we do want to also acknowledge that if we localize a lot of the things that people are looking for, shopping, recreation, parks, etc., then people will be able to walk more places or bike more places and don't have to get in their car to go 5 minutes to the other side of town, or hopefully 5 minutes to the other side. Just to get to a dry cleaners or to a grocery store, you shouldn't have to do that. So that's also a key element that puts a lot of strain in our roads and our drivers.
So if I could mention one more point, is I also have a teenager. I don't allow hitchhiking. It's too scary. I can't handle it. I would love him to bike. If there's any way to fix the bike infrastructure that he can get himself around town on a bike, Baruch Hashem, Lakewood is safe. I feel like I'm safe letting him out of my house from people, but the cars are scary. And if there was more dedicated bike areas, then he can maneuver, and then it takes a lot of traffic off the road without having to carpool your older children who can theoretically get places themselves. Thank you. And I want to end that Lakewood really is a beautiful, beautiful town, and I feel bad that people look so askance at it, but we all moved here because we love it, and we want to see it to stay beautiful. And I think that if people feel like they want only to have houses on 1 acre on big lots, perhaps they would be better served by other neighborhoods that only allow that. But the same way, we are all benefiting from this town, and it's a family-friendly place to raise children, to allow other people to have that benefit of a family-friendly place to raise children.
My name is Mark Hurst. I live in the Fairways on Strawberry Lane. Some people, I happen to agree with the people who feel that traffic is directly related to the number of people who live in town. The cars don't get here themselves. So the more people you bring here, the more cars you're going to have on the road. You need to be proactive in your approach to deal with traffic, which is not happening. I haven't been a resident of Lakewood very long, but I tend to think it probably has never happened. Now the smaller side streets are starting to get clogged with cars. I live in the Fairways, as I said. The latest street that's becoming a problem is Cross Street. When I first got here, it was not heavily traveled, and it was very easy to get around the rest of Lakewood using Cross Street. Now it's getting clogged up on a daily basis. And if you were to widen that road, I don't know where you'd get the land from. A perfect example is the other side towards Route 9 on Cross Street. There's a new development going on, and the development is very close to the road itself. So how you would get adequate setback to even make the road bigger doesn't seem possible. You need to account for all this. I'm a huge fan of public transportation. I'd love to see a public transportation system developed in town. And if you're going to urbanize the area even more at high-density housing, you're going to need to do that. All cities have public transportation facilities. It's a matter of fact. You're going to need to do that. If you allow the development to continue unabated the way it has been and the way it seems to be going, you're going to get to the point very quickly where no one will be able to get around Lakewood. It will just be impossible. You need to plan now for that growth in the future. And I'd like to hope, and I'd like to know that you are doing that.
I agree with Steve Ryman's report that what has to be about traffic is absolutely nothing. And I'll tell you why. Contrary to what everybody's saying, I think that the higher the density you go, the better the traffic problem in Lakewood will be. And I'll explain to you why. Lakewood recently
is building a lot of new homes. Most of the homes, like 75% of the new construction in Lakewood, is sold to the Hasidim of Brooklyn. Not to the residents of Lakewood. The residents of Lakewood are moving out to Jackson, Toms River, Howell, and some of them to Brick. But they're not buying in Lakewood. Now, why bringing in the Hasidim of Brooklyn is helping the traffic problem? As you know, the Hasidim of Brooklyn
This is turning into a farce.
My sign up? Just sit down.
Be respectful. Be respectful. Sit down back there.
Sit down.
Be thankful.
You can do what you want.
As you know, when houses are sold in Lakewood to residents of Brooklyn, and it's helping their problem of, and the developers are able to sell the houses for more money, so it's helping them out. They're selling now duplex for $589. It must probably, if they're going to sell it for those people, most probably is going to go up to $1 million, because for the residents of Lakewood, this is a bargain. What's happening is the residents of Brooklyn, the Hasidim, usually the ladies, the woman of the house doesn't drive. There's even now moving in a sect of Belts, Satma. In the school of Belts, they don't allow anybody.
Phone down. I can't see the guy. Put the phone down.
Anybody that the mother of the house drives is not accepted in the school, and if she starts driving, the kids are expelled from school. So what happens is, when you bring these residents of Brooklyn, I'm talking about the Hasidim and the older Hasidim of Lakewood, not the modern ones. And as Aaron Cutler says, by the mid-century, there won't be any Litvaks in Lakewood because they're taking over the town. So, as these residents of Brooklyn are moving in, you won't have a parking problem because they have less cars. And so the roads will become clearer. And as the residents of Lakewood are moving out, and the Hasidim are moving in, neighborhood by neighborhood, it will clear up the traffic problem. That's the reason why I think Steve Ryman's report is very good, because it goes with a smart growth plan, that you should have the strip malls and the shopping centers and the schools and the playground to one neighborhood, that you shouldn't have to drive. It looks like he's talking about creating a town for the Hasidim. Just one recommendation that I have. As neighborhoods transitions from the yeshivish people that currently live in Lakewood to the Hasidim, please make sure, put it into the master plan recommendation, that you should start putting in sidewalks, because till now you have people driving all over. But once they are moving in, as the neighborhoods gets transitioned, you should put in sidewalks. That's the only thing that I could put in your recommendation, different than you did. Thank you.
Good evening, Mordechai Bernfeld. I just want to thank the board here for all your hard work, and I know it's a lot of time that you put in, and we'll all thank you for that. This past Saturday, I live down on Route 9 and Oak Street. I strolled up all the way to Squonkam. I took Route 9, 8th Street, Squonkam to County Line, and it was a pleasure. No traffic, no traffic. And I was thinking to myself, Saturday. I walked, I took a stroll, okay, up Route 9, an hour and 10 minutes. Okay. Sorry. And I was thinking, you know, how good this would be if we would have this during the week. None of us would be here. We have obviously a big problem, and that's what we're addressing right now. And we have a, let's call it the big elephant in the room. It's called, we have a traffic problem, and a major traffic problem. And for that, we need to fix, and we need to re-examine how we live. Lakewood has turned into a city. We have to think big, and we have to think city big and quickly. We need to think of how to get around town. Either should it be bike lanes, transportations. We need to get less cars on the road. Why does each family have to have 2 cars, and plus the basements, another 2 cars? We have shopping centers nearby. I mean, they just opened up across the street, Evergreen. I think that was great. We can walk, we can go to a shopping center. We don't have to drive. We have to educate and change our mindset. Not every quarter of a mile do we have to drive. And maybe, perhaps, we have to examine the transportation that we have. We have the yeshiva. That's a lot of people going to the yeshiva. Maybe we have to aggressively put transportation at the times that the yeshiva opens and when the yeshiva dismisses. We have to have aggressive transportation. I don't know if you guys are familiar in Jerusalem, the Mir. It's a very big school. Nobody drives. Okay, it's buses and buses and buses. And we just have to think big, city big. We're saying that we have to curb the density. Density is here, and it's here to stay. We have to plan for the future smart and big, city big. And this is where we live. And I thank you again for all your hard work. Thank
you. Bob Miller, Fairways. Lakewood, did you hear it? Lakewood. Your report is wonderful, but I have a few questions. Question number 1, I disagree with that other people that say that density doesn't cause traffic. That's mashugana. How can you say such a thing? You know darn well, the more density, the more cars go on the road. We have a situation, I'm preaching to you, and you know this already. We have a situation where it's unsafe for children to walk. You're talking about putting more kids on the street to walk. You're putting bicycles on the road when there's no roadway for that to happen. You have cars double parked all over the place, and people have to see, and God forbid a child runs out, you don't see him because he's behind the car first that's parked. This is ridiculous. You need to get back to the infrastructure. You need to examine, before you build another house, you need to make sure that the people who live here are safe, because safety comes first. You got to make sure that their safety and well-being of you and everybody here has that experience, that has that confidence that our board is doing the right thing for us. They're protecting us. We need to know that. We need to know that we're talking about a future plan now. The first thing you have to do is say, no more high-density building, stop, let's get the roads in shape, let's get the streets where they should be. There's roads, unfortunately, you'll never be able to widen. It was already approved, and they're built right up on the roadway, a 2-lane roadway. For instance, Cross Street. I don't know about you, but I can't get down. It takes me a half an hour to get down Cross Street. It's ridiculous. From Massachusetts to the end of Cross Street takes sometimes 45 minutes because of the buses and the cars and everything else. And you want to put more of that around? Doesn't make sense. We really need to give it a hard look, and we need to see what's the best way. Now, public transportation is wonderful. You got to understand, this is not Brooklyn, folks. This is the suburbs. It's supposed to be. Not to bring everybody from Brooklyn to Lakewood. What's the deal here? I don't understand that. I came from Brooklyn. I came from Borough Park. But it wasn't Meshuggah like it is here. Here you can't move. There I was able to move because there was a bus. There was a taxi cab. There was a subway. There's ways to get around without a car. But over here, how do you do it? You need a car. And everybody in the family that can drive, they have to go grocery shopping. They have to go do this. They have to go do, or else we have no life. So what's the point of living in a town where you have no life? We should be concerned about the quality of life, and it starts with traffic. You have a hard one because yours is the big issue. Because you can't get to the parks. You can't get anywhere unless there's a way to do that. And so when we talk about parks, that's wonderful, and Bill does a great job, but how are we gonna get there? We all have to walk. So then we have to be 20 years old. Some of us can't walk, so what are we supposed to do? Okay? There's people who are handicapped. What are you going to do? Schlep them around in a wheelchair? Come on, give me a break. We need to think. All I'm saying is we need to think. You're the brains here. You guys have to tell those powers that be that we need to look at this the right way. This gentleman here, that's your job, is to figure out what's smart. And it's really not smart the way things are happening. I know you can't say anything because you're a contractor, but the truth of the matter is it's not smart. We need to make sure you can't put the chicken before the egg. You have to be able to straighten things out and then go do what you want after that. But you got to straighten these things out. You can't keep building and building and building when there's no place to build. And as you're building, there's no room for parks. So what's the sense? Okay, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Aaron Hirsch. I would just like to add a little on that last comment. The difference, you talk about, you grew up in Brooklyn.
That's right.
The only difference is Brooklyn actually has a grid. And we don't.
That's right.
We are talking about Route 9, expanded, screaming that the state's not coming to bail us out. We've been destroying that, cul-de-sacs all over the place. We've eliminated our grid, and now we're talking to the state. The state doesn't have money. They're not giving us the money. We really have to deal with the problem that we have here. We have to build a grid. There's a lot of streets that were not enforced. I believe I've heard there is a law in this over here that if you develop over 1,000 square feet, you are required to. You're supposed to build the streets around your property. Now, from what I understand, from what I've heard, it has not been done. So now we have a lot of streets that are still on paper that haven't been created. And if we had more streets, we might not everyone have to squeeze on Route 9. Because guess what? There's only one road that goes from one side of town to the other side of town, and we have to share it with the trucks going from Toms River to Howell, and there's a lot going on. And we don't have any streets to go through. So everyone, there's all these cul-de-sac neighborhoods, or Route 9, they should be able to go out a back way instead of having to force onto Route 9. We need a grid, and we really have to start dealing with that problem. That is one of our biggest problems. If we talk about traffic's not an issue, how come a major company like UPS has decided to pick up and leave, and there's thousands of people that have internet businesses that are going to be affected by it? I've heard that they're going to Bayville.
With all due respect, every few months somebody comes out with that as a complaint about traffic. It's not accurate. Or if it's accurate, I haven't heard it from anybody.
That what?
UPS, all I hear is people coming forward every few minutes, UPS is leaving. UPS is not leaving.
I heard they didn't renew their contract.
As you point out. They have an enormous business.
It would be a loss.
We've done things to, what's that?
It would be a loss, God forbid, if they left. Tremendous loss.
It would be a terrible loss for us, and we've done things to make life easier for them within where they are in the park.
I hope
But
so.
it doesn't
I hope
make
they
any
don't leave.
sense in the world for anybody to say UPS is going to move out to Wall Township and make a 20-minute drive every day to the hundreds of users that they have in our park. It's absolutely baloney, and it's not right, excuse me, for being blunt.
Well,
But you can't, unless you have specific knowledge of it, and you can come to me after the meeting and tell me who you spoke to within that company that's told you that.
Not within UPS, from actually the person that owns the lot. I heard from someone that spoke to them.
They own the lot. That's another thing that people keep saying. They're not renting. They own it under a corporate name.
But is it true that they have a half-hour delay for their trucks coming in and out every day?
No, not anymore. Okay?
Oh, that's been resolved? I'm glad. Okay, no, I'm glad. So, okay, so let's back off of that. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong on that.
Somebody will say something in a setting like this, it spreads like wildfire, it's absolute truth. When it's absolute falsehood, and somebody made it up, and it's not right. Come to the industrial park any every day, watch the activity, see what's going on. It's a tremendous bustling area. It's something that we should treasure and that we should appreciate. And if people don't know what we have here, you should go out and see it. But we shouldn't undermine it, because somebody will hear it and they'll say, oh, my little company that I was going to move to the industrial park, that's growing fast, I'll go somewhere else because UPS doesn't like Lakewood. That's not right. That's just not right.
So I'll just double verify and I'll get you that information. Okay, because I heard from someone that seems to know it, but perhaps everyone knows something that some other people don't. Okay, back to really what my issue was with regards to the grid. We need to have a grid, and waiting for the state to come in and give us, I don't know how many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to widen the road and then clear out all the properties. We have to really deal with what we can control. The only road going across town is a state road from north to south, and we have to share that with everyone going from Tom's River to Howell. I'm just trying to bring up that we need to really seriously think about a proper grid and stop eliminating, developing, not improve the roads around the property. It is important because eventually we're going to have to build those roads. And who's going to pay for it?
And that is part of our recommendation. Our recommendation is to preserve the grid wherever it exists in paper streets, and wherever streets have not been improved to allow for a grid effect, we suggested that they do it. There are parts of the town that are not laid out in the grid, and the idea that we can impose a grid on those parts of town, it's just not realistic. So we have to understand that there are going to be places that are not conducive to high volume traffic, and there we need to do other things to make it easier. Whether it's mass transit, whether it's bike lanes, we have to do other things. But definitely, I think everybody's in agreement with me, it's part of our recommendation.
As opening up all the paper streets.
Maintained and be promoted wherever possible.
So you're on board with opening paper streets?
Yes.
Perfect.
Not just paper street, but wherever existing streets have just been stopped. They're
We
improved
need
on
that.
both ends and not connected. We want them connected. We want them to be those streets.
Well, that would be great if we could open up a lot of those streets, because that would alleviate just Route 9, everyone having to go down there.
Sorry if I cut you off before, but.
Ariel Schulman, 59 Drake Road. Sitting here all night long, I think that the problem is that we're transitioning from a town to a city. And at that point, the old master plan just doesn't work anymore. Not to go backwards, that all those cul-de-sacs a lot of that was done because our zoning was 1 home per 2 acres. And in order to do any kind of density, you are allowed to cluster develop. And cluster developing made cul-de-sacs. And that is part of the problem as far as the grid idea has to happen. I think that we need to focus on alternate side of the street parking rules, things that other cities have, because we have double and triple parking. We're not making parking garages. We're not doing any of that. The more you make us more of a city, the more public transportation has to come in. And yes, less cars, because as you develop, you're going to put things within walking distance, and maybe that's the way the town's going to go. But right now, I think the master plan or the committee here has to really think of transitioning to city status, whether it's public works. Maybe you need an audit. Maybe there needs to be an audit of all the departments to see where the money goes, where it's going, and how you can efficiently turn Lakewood more into a city, more public transportation, and address the needs that we're all hearing here tonight. More cars on the road, that's not going to do any better, but you're not going to stop density. You're not going to stop from building. You're not going to stop people from selling their homes. It's not going to stop. Eventually, we tried that 20 years ago. We tried to stop the fairways from going in. We didn't want, it was originally 1 home per acre, regular gated community, and then it flipped to a retirement community, 4 homes per acre. So when it happens in one spot and now 25 years later, we dealt with that 25 years ago. Now the fairways has to deal with that 25 years later of more density. I just think that the subcommittee really needs to really think about moving to more city-like status, and that means changing committees, changing township departments to function that way. Otherwise, we just go round and round and round here, and we get nowhere. Nowhere. Because everybody who moved to Lakewood, who wants a town, wants their town. But everybody who's moving here from Brooklyn wants more, maybe Lakewood's a town to them, and maybe more density creates more town-like atmosphere for them. But that's the way it's going. So why not we focus and take our energies and our monies and put it towards what's going to work? Infrastructure has to be done. Everything was countrified paving in the Western Corridor. We were all horse country. That's why our roadways are breaking down. So now that everything has to be started over, this subcommittee needs to think about a little bit bigger. It's not a town anymore. It's a city. And how do you run a city? Maybe some of the people from Brooklyn who were on township committees who know how to run city, maybe their input would be a lot better than people who run a town. Maybe that's the problem. They don't know how to transition. Thank you.
Good evening. Brian Murphy from FWH Associates. I'm a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey. I've been developments in this town and throughout the state. I've seen my own town quadruple in size as Lakewood has seen, and quite honestly, it's typical growth. It's going to continue to grow. We know it's going to continue to grow. If we stop development today, you still have a traffic problem. So you have a choice. How do you fix it? You can't put your head in the sand. It's happening. So either you follow Mr. Ryman's plan where basically the developers pay into that fund, and that's not going to happen with 1 acre lots. You're just not going to generate enough funds to do that. It's going to come with density. And as the young lady who just spoke indicated, to have any kind of mass transportation, that comes with density, not less density. So if you're going to fix the problem, you're going to have to build your way out of it. I know it's counterintuitive, but that is the way forward. It's the only way you're going to get out of this.
David Bender, 160 Colonial Drive in the Chestnut area. I have a question. I understand everybody's talking about the density and that Lakewood is turning into a city and you can't do anything about it, and I understand you can't do anything about the way it is right now. But why does it say we have to look forward and let more building and let more density? Let's look forward to what we have right now and how we're going to deal with what we have right now in the next 10 years, as opposed to saying we're just going to go ahead and accept that Lakewood is turning into a city. Another idea that I have is a little bit out of the box, but the biggest times that there's traffic is in the morning when either people are going to schools or people are going to yeshiva. And I know like there is one bus that goes up and down to Lakewood. If there was more busing that went to the yeshiva and there was possibly a tax break for people that would take public transportation, that would give people a bigger incentive to use public transportation. I don't know if it's legal, if it's possible, but if people had an incentive, a financial incentive not to drive, it would definitely help out. Give me a second, my list. One more thing, two more things I want to mention. I'm a firefighter in Lakewood. On Tynus Esther, we had a call for a structure fire in Westgate. I went from Chestnut on Route 9 to Westgate. We were told the house was on fire, and it turns out that a UPS driver was driving by and put out the fire himself. But if that was not dealt with, that would have been a big problem. There's a lot of density out there in Westgate, and all it takes is one house to catch on to another house and to another house. Cross Street was backed up, lights and everything. I got absolutely nowhere. What's it going to take for something to happen for people to wake up? We had a fire call 2 days ago from my house on Chestnut to get to the firehouse on James and Route 9. I timed it, took me 17 minutes. If there are going to be people trapped, I mean, you look at the fire that happened in Brooklyn a couple years ago where 7 kids died. The fire department got there in 4 minutes and they couldn't save them. How will we volunteers that put our lives on the line to save people, supposed to get the fire, supposed to try to help people, when we can't even get through town, we can't even get to give up our time, put our lives on the line to save other people. We can't even get their lights and everything. Nobody's pulling over because there is nowhere to pull over. There is nowhere for people to go. And my last point, I'm getting a little emotional. I have a sick kid that has a lot of problems. She gets infections, and at any given time during the day, I have to go to the doctor. I randomly have to run to Philadelphia. I have to run to Dr. Shanek's office on 4th and Route 9. And sometimes when your kid is sick and your kid has a fever and wakes up and kid was fine yesterday and you have no idea what happened to your kid, why your kid is sick, all you know is you have to get your kid to a doctor. And every minute you're sitting in a car, you don't know what's wrong with your kid, you don't know if your kid's gonna make it, you don't know what's gonna happen, and you're just sitting and crying in traffic because you can't get there. Something has to be done. You can't keep it up. It's gonna take for God forbid, a house fire, for people to die, for first responders not to be able to get there, for sick kids not to be able to get to the hospital. Someone mentioned earlier, an ambulance wasn't able to get through traffic. What's it gonna take for people to wake up and realize that the status quo is not working? I understand more people want to move into town. I understand the builders want to build, and if they own properties, they have a right to build. But what's it going to take for you guys to plan properly? Whatever plans are out there are not working, and I know you guys are looking to build forward to have a sensible plan, but what's it going to take for people to wake up and stop pointing and saying, well, the master plan says this, so I could do this, or it's not a density problem, it's a traffic problem. What's it going to take? How many people are going to have to die? How many sick kids are going to have their conditions worse before people wake up and actually decide they're going to do something? Thank you.
Okay, so I think, you want to...
Joe Gibbowitz. I have a question. Are you planning, isn't in the report to open Kennedy? Open Kennedy Boulevard, East Kennedy. I didn't saw the report, so.
One of the ones we recommended.
To recommend, man. Yeah.
It's
So I
in
know,
the transportation subcommittee report, it's in the Parks and Open Space
to open
subcommittee.
Kennedy.
I think it's also in one of the other reports. But,
Okay,
yeah.
so that's one. All the way till the Parkway?
All the way down. All the way down. You're the proof that we have. All the way down.
What?
Yeah, that's it.
So that's.
And you came to the subcommittee.
I didn't saw the report, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so, okay, so at this time, I'm going to ask the board members, do you have any further comments, anything else you want to put into this report?
Just one. Obviously, this is a fantastic report. I commend you and your group on it. The question that I would have is, there is so many solutions that we have to seek for the problems that we have. Should we be prioritizing them in some way? There are some things that are going to happen quickly, and there are some things that can't happen for a while. For instance, we can't get the money we need from the state to widen some of the roads that we have. We can still fight for it, we can hope for it, but what are we going to do in the interim? Is there some way for us to make that in this recommendation so that there are solutions that happen that alleviate? Exactly.
Then, I'll work with you, Marty, to rank them. But there are, it's a very good point, and I think there are basic recommendations that are much easier to do, like opening the streets that are closed, and investing in mass transit, which we can do at a local level. Might not be enough, but definitely it's something that we can do, and a number of the other recommendations, and then to give maybe a lower priority ranking, although it's not lower priority, to things like advocating for the monoline and for road widening. However, from a zoning perspective, what we're recommending to identify some of these artery roads and to put in the zoning like the HD 6 or HD 7 that actually demand setbacks that will protect it for future widening, that's something that's immediate. So, we do recommend this.
Stephen, also, the most doable to the really hard to do would be a good ranking. In other words, we always have to think of the expense involved, the return on that investment. And also the merchants in town, the pushback. Nobody that is a merchant in town really wants one-way streets. That I've heard.
In the downtown?
In the downtown.
Well, I'm going to wait for the downtown committee report.
We're going to see that, but at the open meeting with transportation, there was a lot of pushback on that.
Yeah.
The idea being, if you have to go around the block or around a few blocks to get to my establishment, you might stop somewhere else. And I'm open for business. Listen, all things considered.
It's a legitimate concern. I will tell you that in the last 5 or 6 years, some of those streets downtown have turned one way, two way, back to one way, the other way. And I can say something there. To implement solutions that will be impactful is going to require people to go through the discomfort of change. And there is discomfort, but most change that happens, we adjust to it, we adapt to it. And, you know, I don't want to jump Ben's report on the downtown, but we have to do something. It's a really critical place. Some of the solutions that are recommended have been extremely successful in other places. And it's probably a good idea for us to look at best practices that have worked in other places and try to adopt them where they're logical. So,
Good report, thank you.
A couple of quick things. First of all, Steve, thank you again. Great report, wonderful report. Just some very minor things. Page 13, you mentioned something, one of the new traffic lights. And I know is something that's actually in place, and I think that's one of the five in the township. It's actually put out the bid, so that should probably be added to the report, it's going to be the report. And we can't find that traffic light, it's going in there very soon. One other question, that's on page 6 of your report. Talk about the one-way streets, which I know we spoke a lot about. Kind of split it up from Main Street to 9th and then from 10th to Courtney. Any difference in that, or is the bridge just going straight from there to there?
Wherever it's practicalized, I think when we get out to areas like the old Little League field, you have to take into account some of the residents of the area and figure out what's going to work. Kind of back and forth a little bit. It's probably most critical from Main to 5th or 6th, and then beyond that is wherever it works. So you have to know, can you do a one-way street on 7th Street? If Lisbon Avenue grades closes that street for part of the day, you know, is that going to impede traffic and so on? There's things like that that have to be looked at. The professionals are going to be able to look at that and say, will it work? But the idea of going to a grid of
as much as possible,
one-way streets, as much as possible is all right.
And angle parking is something else.
Well,
Certainly,
that's something that
in downtown, I know, but in the campus area as well, I think that's something that perhaps, you know, think that perhaps we should add that as another recommendation to look in angle parking throughout the campus area. So try to pick up the parking possible.
I would put that on page 6 under the second goal of creating.
Correct. That's something that, and thank you again.
One quick question, Steve. I looked through the report. Does it say anyone specifically and directly about preserving paper streets where possible, where it doesn't conflict with smart growth plans and so forth? I know we talked about it. Does it say, is there a specific direct statement saying wherever possible to promote the keeping of paper streets and developing them?
And developing them or not?
Well, I mean, at least just not letting big.
I think that we made a comment earlier on in the report about opening paper streets where possible. Facilitate grid effect.
I know you mentioned that. I just didn't remember if I saw it clearly specified.
I think I did see that. I remember. Connectivity, number 5 on page 1. Sean, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it says an average summary. I don't know if that should be included as one of the specific recommendations at the end of the report.
I would think that should be.
Steve, I particularly like your mass transportation, improve the pressure on New Jersey Transit to establish their service. And I would accompany that with some kind of local service in Lakewood Township.
Rail?
Well, not the train, the bus.
Yes.
The many-type buses that could traverse the roadways and take the cars off this route.
That's exactly the objective. Wherever possible, we'd like to see an expansion of the bus service that we have, and also taking into account that New Jersey Transit does have buses that go from the southern terminus of Route 9 in Lakewood, actually, into downtown. Like, we can connect with another bus. Again, it's behavior modification. This is change. And when people realize that they can make do with one less car, there's a savings there. The savings on insurance, the savings on upkeep, the savings on gas. but there has to be enough of a system in place to make it practical for people. They have to be able to get not just from point A to point B, but to points B, C, D, E, F, and J.
Exactly. Where you address parking, with the constructive multi-parking, level parking garage, I think that's essential for Lakewood. That gets the cars off of the street so you can implement the diagonal parking. Get them a central parking. And I love the idea of creating a municipal parking authority. I don't want to be a bureaucrat. The idea here is, if we are approaching city status, we better start acting like it. And nobody is in charge of municipal parking. You got to put somebody in charge and make them responsible for it.
And so the reason that it hasn't been implemented before, certainly during the economic downturn, one of the biggest things these parking authorities do is institute meters, parking meters.
Sure.
And if you go to Red Bank or other towns in times of economic downturn, they shut off their meters because they don't want to discourage people from coming to the place. So it hasn't yet been something that's practical for Lakewood. But certainly if there's a movement on building a parking garage, which has been planned for many, many years, and if more robust parking provision gets built into the plan, then it may be relevant for the town to look at creating a parking authority and investing in that the ability to do things.
I would think, as Jersey said, that if there's grant writers that could help us find some federal or state dollars.
There was federal and state money, it was money for the parking garage, Clifton Avenue, very actively working. Very actively working on that. I think that can happen very, it's expected to happen very soon.
They're not going to work that years.
Okay, very good. So there was one specific recommendation that we're actually going to put into the report. No, is there? Is there? Oh, it's already in. Oh, yeah, you had it. Yeah.
A few just small things that they suggested to add.
Adding angle parking.
We're gonna add angle parking in the campus area.
Okay.
And just to add, not as a recommendation, but just to MLK and Pines as a light. And is there widening of the county line? It's actually not. There's three widening, and that's just across.
We don't know the county line, and what we're suggesting is that the example, every artery road be examined for possibilities.
Okay. Good. So we're going to include those in the actual recommendations. Okay, so I'm going to go down the line again. Are we going to adopt the report as proposed with the one more recommendations?
In favor.
Yes.
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 Okay, terrific. So we're past 9 o'clock now, folks. We got through a couple of reports, which we're very happy about, but we're obviously going to have to schedule another meeting. We're going to try to do that as soon as possible. But we thank everybody for coming out, and have a great night. We'll see you next time.
I have to say something. You had a room full of seniors that were here to discuss this. You had a room full of seniors here tonight to discuss the community's needs, the senior community needs. We're always at the end. The meetings are always canceled, and then when they have them again, we don't know about it. This is not fair to us.
Okay, so I typically try not to use the terms always or never because I'm not really sure, but what exactly you're referring to, but it was placed at the end of the agenda. I mean, it wasn't at the end of the agenda, it was actually the fourth report. I think we all can agree that the meeting went a little bit longer.
Well, then maybe you need to use the timer like they do at the board meetings.
We were trying to avoid cutting people off the middle of their.
But this is just not right that we don't get a chance to talk about what we need.
Next time, we're going to consider maybe using the clock to cut people off.
Hello, before you go, can you assure us that the next point that was supposed to be discussed tonight will at least be first on the next agenda so this doesn't happen again and again? The seniors.
The senior was not the next point. That was the next that was going to be discussed next time. But you can come back. These meetings go a long time, we're all here, we're all volunteers, I know you came out, we came out, everybody came out, so.
No, I understand, but, you know, to come again and have it too late. Okay, thank you.